My mom cooks way better than yours. Some of us leaned back in our chairs while others sat up straight. There were 4 of us around the table, and it was loaded with fancy food. Usually we wouldn't have such an extravagant meal, but today we were dining with the in-laws, so it was a special occasion. Keith looked at me with a smug smile on his face, even as he ate. But this food was made by me, wasn't it? Your usual mistress's cooking is terrible, he remarked. My response spilled out, directed at Keith's comment. I glanced at my in-laws, trying to gauge their reactions. They looked puzzled, and the atmosphere in the room became tense. It felt like time stopped for a moment, and no one could move or speak, holding their forks in their hands. I realized there was no need to keep hiding. I didn't want to continue my relationship with Keith and his parents. I was the only one feeling this bitterness, but I was ready to fight back. I had planned to get back at Keith during today's gathering for a while now. That's why I had left our daughter with my parents. I didn't want her to witness this ugly side of me or be affected by it. My goal was to get revenge on Keith, and I was secretly pleased about it. My name is Rachel Davis, I'm 34 years old, and my daughter Nag just started elementary school. I'm your average housewife, living comfortably without any major troubles. Even though I have the means to live luxuriously, I'm not overly greedy. All I want is to be happy with my husband, Keith. On the surface, people might think we're a happy couple. But there's something that's been bothering me. Keith, who turned 39 this year, has been coming home late recently. It's been a norm for him to come home late since we got married. Keith works for a well-known company, and I know he's given important responsibilities. I assume there must be valid reasons for him not coming home early. I've always supported Keith and never accused him of anything, even though he deals with a lot of stress from work. He tries his best for our family, often planning trips for us on his days off. Despite the stress, we've never had arguments like other couples might. I've made up my mind to go somewhere tomorrow. I apologize for springing this on you suddenly. It's okay. I understand your situation with your husband. So what exactly do you need me to look into? Timothy asked as we sat on opposite couches, lost in thought. He spread some documents on the glass table in front of me. We have a plan to gather evidence through photos and our staff getting close to your husband, Timothy explained carefully, outlining the details of the plan. If that's the case, I'm on board with this option, I said, pointing to the plan written in the documents and nodding in agreement. At the moment, I was in the city, having visited a detective agency located in a back alley not far from downtown. Timothy Rogers, the detective assigned to my case, sat across from me, dressed in a black suit. Since yesterday, I couldn't shake off the suspicion that Keith might be cheating on me. Turning to a professional detective seemed like the best option. I didn't want to discuss my doubts about my husband with just anyone. But the urge to uncover the truth was stronger, so I explained the events leading up to this point. What does your husband do for work? Timothy inquired. He holds a managerial position in sales at a major corporation, I replied cautiously. He's like a department head. Understood. I won't ask for the company's name right now, Timothy assured me. I don't want to involve unnecessary people in this matter. That's appreciated, I responded. Typically, he works at the sales branch. If he works there, I'd like to know the company's name, Timothy requested. I'll tell you, but please promise not to tell anyone else, I said nervously, grabbing a pen and quickly jotting down the name on a notepad. This company is quite prominent, isn't it? Timothy remarked. Yes, that's why I was hesitant to mention it, I admitted. Please keep it confidential. Of course, we don't want to cause any harm to the company, Timothy assured me. This is strictly personal. 2 weeks later, I returned to the detective agency and met with Timothy again. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your husband is cheating, he revealed. Oh really? I gasped in surprise, feeling a mix of emotions. It was like I had resigned myself to this possibility, yet the confirmation still hurt deeply. Despite the pain, I felt a sense of duty to accept the truth. Despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me, I managed to keep a composed facade. What's your next move? Do you want to continue the investigation further? Timothy asked. Yes, please. I want to dig deeper, I replied, even though my heart felt heavy. So, we'll need to get more involved. Are you sure about that? Timothy questioned. Yes, I am. I affirmed, though I felt like my heart was sinking into darkness. I wanted to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. At this point, the affair is confirmed, Timothy confirmed. And there were times when your husband stayed with the woman he was having the affair with, not just for work reasons. His words ignited anger within me, but I pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. "Do you want to see the photographic evidence now or later?" Timothy asked. "Show it to me," I requested, my voice trembling. Timothy handed me a photo from a brown envelope. As I looked at it, I saw Keith entering his mistress's house. The woman seemed to be around my age, but she appeared younger and more attractive. Keith looked happier with her than he did with me. My daughter Naomi's earlier observation wasn't a lie. She was only in first grade, and I didn't want to disrupt her life with a divorce. But I couldn't stay with a cheating husband either. If the affair affected Naomi negatively, it would be too late. Suppressing my pain, I made a decision. "I need as much information as you can provide," I told Timothy. "All right then, we'll proceed with the investigation for about 2 months. Is that okay with you?" Timothy asked. "Yes, I have enough money for it." "Please, I need you to do this," I said firmly, meeting Timothy's gaze. But suddenly, a voice interrupted us. Hey, don't you go making decisions on your own. All you do is lie," the voice accused. "No, it's the truth," I replied firmly, ready to face whatever came next. Now that I'm at Keith's parents' house without Naomi, I can fully respond to Keith's accusations. I haven't lied or deceived my parents-in-law, so why should I hide the truth? Besides, there's no benefit for me in doing so. A few days before coming here, I received a report from Timothy confirming that the investigation was completed. All the information from the detective was in the bag next to me. Keith can't deny it, and once the evidence is presented, his parents should understand. But I needed to be cautious. Knowing Keith's tendency to deceive, I decided to reveal the truth to his parents while observing the situation. "You're crazy. My son would never cheat. You just keep lying," Keith's father exclaimed, his voice echoing inside the room. Just moments ago, we were having a pleasant conversation, but a minor disagreement between Keith and me escalated the situation, making the atmosphere tense. I had only mentioned that Keith hadn't been coming home for the past 6 months, but he immediately got defensive and accused me of lying. It was me who triggered this, but my resentment towards my husband ran deep. I had come to this gathering with feelings of revenge. According to my son, you can't even manage household chores properly. You're just at home and yet you don't do anything, Keith's mother chimed in, echoing her son's accusations. "That's a misunderstanding," I replied firmly, pushing down my feelings and locking eyes with Keith's father, even though his expression was intimidating. "Your son is lying." "Misunderstanding? Are you suggesting my son is lying?" Keith's father challenged. "Yes," I continued speaking, determined to stand my ground. "That's ridiculous. My son is a light. I've always provided him with a good education and quality meals. Moreover, I've taught him to be respectful and not to be a bother to others. Do you think someone like him would cheat? It's impossible." But Keith's father stubbornly refused to acknowledge what his son had done. Perhaps it was his lack of knowledge about the situation that made him unwilling to accept the truth. But Robert's demeanor grew increasingly tense. I was just about to present the evidence when Susan, who had always been kind to me, spoke up. "I used to trust you, but after this incident, I just can't anymore," she said, her tone filled with disappointment. Susan had been kind to me since I arrived early at their home today. She had even recommended Keith to marry me. Susan and my mother were old friends, so her kindness was expected. However, now she looked at me with suspicion, as if I were a criminal. "If things are really that bad, we might have to consider divorce," Susan suggested, almost sighing. I didn't want to bring up divorce. Our family runs a well-known company, and if people find out that someone like me is Keith's wife, it could tarnish our reputation. In about 10 years, Keith will become the CEO, and then we won't be able to ignore it anymore. Susan continued, her expression apologetic. "And she can't even cook properly for me." "That's not true," Keith interjected, defending his mother's accusation. "Your cooking tastes bad." In the room where the 4 of us were, Keith arrogantly picked up his fork and began eating. His attitude irritated me even more. "Actually, my mom's cooking is way better than yours," Keith laughed, trying to provoke me. "But that was made by me though, isn't it? Your usual mistress whose cooking is awful," he added, stunning me with his remark. The atmosphere in the room became tense, and I felt the need to excuse myself. Both sets of parents-in-law looked shocked, their mouths hanging open. Keith also widened his eyes in realization, dropping the grilled fish from his fork. He had set down his fork onto the table. "What do you mean?" Susan questioned, her tone filled with concern. "Just what I said," I replied smoothly. "As I've been saying, the one lying is my husband." "Hey, stop making stuff up." Keith slammed his fork on the table, yelling. "It's not a lie. Plus, I cooked the grilled fish after I came here this morning, in place of your mother. You and your father wouldn't know since you arrived in the afternoon," he added defensively. As I explained, Keith grew even more irritated, his face turning bright red. "Want to see the evidence? If you have it, show it," he challenged, standing up abruptly. "All right, I'll show you then," I responded, taking a more serious tone. "What? No, you must be lying. That's just nonsense," Keith protested, but I remained serious. "Well, anyway, I haven't done anything wrong," Keith muttered quietly, sitting back down. "You know what'll happen if you're lying, right?" Robert shouted, his anger evident. "First off, calm down. Does Rachel really have evidence?" Susan interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. In that moment, Susan was the only one able to think rationally. I reached into my bag and took out an envelope containing photos and a letter-sized paper from Timothy, the detective. Placing them on the table, I could see my husband's face turn pale as he watched my move. "No, it's not like that," Keith protested, desperate to avoid confronting the truth, repeatedly denying it. "What is this? What does it mean?" Robert demanded, visibly agitated. "It's nothing," Keith covered his ears, refusing to face reality. "These photos, who's this person? Don't tell me you've really been cheating," Robert questioned, disbelief evident in his voice. "Yes, that's right. That's why I have these photos taken as evidence. This isn't fabricated. I've also consulted with an attorney," I explained calmly in response to Robert's remarks. "If we decide to divorce, it'll be handled according to the law," I stated without hesitation. I harbored a deep-seated intention to make Keith pay for his actions. This could tarnish my company's reputation. Robert's voice grew weak, the earlier momentum now a distant memory. "What's the truth?" Susan asked, her tone filled with concern. Keith covered his face with both hands, unwilling to accept reality. However, he could no longer avoid the undeniable truth. Slowly, his distressed expression began to show, indicating his struggle to regain composure. "All right, I'll talk," Keith finally said, slumping as if exhausted. I cheated, but it's not entirely my fault." From the beginning, Keith tried to justify himself. "I originally had someone I loved. Yeah, I had never mentioned this before. Before I met you, before Mom introduced you to me. Why did you choose me then?" I questioned, taken aback. "Because it looked good socially," Keith spoke with difficulty, then glanced at his parents. "Dad wanted me to get married soon, so I was set up with someone Mom recommended." "If you loved someone, why didn't you tell me?" Robert demanded, his anger evident. "It was someone I met about 10 years ago. She worked at a nightlife spot. Given that my father runs a major company, I couldn't openly discuss it," Keith admitted, revealing a truth I had never known. "I see, a nightlife spot. Well, in that case, I probably would have opposed the marriage," Robert acknowledged. "So it's not entirely my fault. Actually, I wanted to marry her," Keith confessed, shocking me. "We've lived together for several years, even had a child, but all this time, Keith never truly loved me," I realized, feeling the weight of his words hit me hard. "She told me it'd be okay if we got married this year, so I thought this was my chance," Keith explained further. "What are you talking about? Chance for what?" Susan asked, her confusion evident. "It was my last shot at marrying her. Plus, I thought if I badmouthed Rachel, Dad and Mom would agree to our divorce," Keith admitted, his frustration evident. "I'm sick of it all. The societal expectations and all that. I just want to live a simple life. I'd rather spend my life with that woman than with our family." A pang of sympathy washed over me as I realized Keith had been carrying the weight of stress for our family all these years. However, it dawned on me that our relationship was merely a facade for him. When I realized that our relationship lacked genuine love and was merely for appearances, it became increasingly painful. "What are you going to do about your marriage?" Susan asked, breaking the tense silence. I'm going to get a divorce," I replied firmly. "Do you have any idea how much money I've spent on you?" Robert's anger flared. Hey, stop it. Are you taking his side now? Susan interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. We've never heard his true feelings before. He's always followed our advice and did the right thing even back in his college days. What about my business? I won't accept it unless he marries someone suitable, Robert declared, his fury toward Keith showing no signs of abating. I'm sorry, Keith's voice quivered in pain. Just saying sorry won't cut it, Robert retorted sternly. But don't you think it's enough that he's finally been honest with us? Susan intervened, gently prodding Robert to calm down emotionally. I'm getting a divorce, so I'll be taking over my company. What is your answer? Robert asked Keith with an angry expression. I can't take it over anymore, Keith admitted. I see. Are you prepared to take full responsibility? Robert questioned, seeking confirmation. It might be tough, but I'll figure something out, Keith replied. Do as you please. I won't say a thing. From today, you're no longer part of this family. Remember that, Robert declared, leaving the dining table in disbelief. I'm truly sorry, Keith expressed deep regret to me, begging for forgiveness. But no matter the circumstances, I couldn't forgive Keith for upending my life. I was set on getting a divorce and planned to seek child support. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to suppress my feelings of resentment. I called the attorney I had spoken with earlier that day, and the divorce proceedings with Keith began the next day. A few months have passed since then, and although I can't live as comfortably as before, I believe my life has improved. I feel better about my current situation. Mom, I'm off. Be careful, honey, I called out as Naomi headed off to school. Now in the second grade, she was growing up fast. As a single mom, I had to start working again. But it was still better than living with Keith, who had no love for us. After ensuring Naomi was safely off to school, I headed to work. The company I work for is managed by my father-in-law. I reconciled with my parents-in-law, and they've been a great support, helping me in various ways. Through their assistance, I was able to join my current company. However, I didn't know what had become of Keith after the divorce. He went to the person he had an affair with and never returned home. Keith had always had a decent amount of money, so the child support was paid promptly. Later on, through grapevine, I heard of someone resembling Keith wandering the streets at night alone, looking haggard with a pained expression. I didn't dwell on it. Whatever happened to a man who lost everything didn't matter to me now. My duty was to work hard for Naomi, letting go of the past. I took the first step into a new life.
I grew up in a pretty standard family, just me and my folks, living in a small, cozy house at the edge of town. My dad worked the late shifts at the factory, and my mom was a cashier at the local grocery store. Money was tight, but we got by. I was their only kid, and they poured all their love into me, even though I wasn't the easiest child to care for. From a young age, I was always the sickly one, catching colds that seemed to linger for weeks and struggling with a bunch of allergies that kept me indoors more than out. I was thin, way too thin for my age, and my clothes? Well, let's just say fashion was the least of our concerns. School was a battlefield. I tried to blend into the background, but somehow, I always stood out, and not in a good way. My classmate, Sarah, she made sure of that. Sarah was everything I wasn't: popular, pretty, and always dressed like she was about to walk into a photo shoot. One day, trying to dodge the bullies, I was late to class. Slipping into my seat, I hoped for a quiet day. That hope vanished the moment Sarah noticed me. Look who decided to show up, Sarah sneered, loud enough for the whole class to hear. Thought you were too sick to come to school, or did you finally find something to wear that didn't come from a charity bin? Her friends laughed, echoing her cruelty. I wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to hide. I kept my eyes down, whispering, "Just leave me alone, Sarah." "What was that?" she mocked, stepping closer. "Can't hear you. Speak up." Before I could muster a response, Mr. Jenkins, our math teacher, entered the room, cutting off whatever Sarah had planned next. The rest of the day, I kept to myself, speaking only when spoken to, and even then, my words were barely above a whisper. At home, things were different. It was my safe haven. My parents, seeing my downcast eyes at dinner, exchanged worried glances. "Nellie, honey, you barely touched your food. Something happened at school today? My mom asked, her voice full of concern. I shrugged, pushing my food around my plate. It's nothing. Just tired, I guess. My dad, quiet until now, put down his fork. You know, Nellie, you can talk to us. Whatever it is, we're here for you. I nodded, knowing they meant every word. But explaining the day's humiliation felt impossible. Thanks, Dad. I'm just really tired. Think I'll head to bed early. Dragging my feet towards the school gates, I braced myself for another day of dodging glares and whispered insults. My backpack felt like it weighed a ton, loaded with textbooks and the heavy dread of facing Sarah and her clique. As I navigated the crowded hallways, trying my best to become invisible, I heard the all-too-familiar voice that made my stomach twist in knots. Hey, ghost girl, try not to vanish before class starts, sneered Mark, one of Sarah's loyal sidekicks. His nickname for me, a jab at my pale complexion and tendency to keep to myself, echoed off the lockers, drawing snickers from nearby students. I quickened my pace, not daring to look up. Just ignore him, I muttered to myself, but the words felt hollow. The day's first challenge was surviving homeroom. Mrs. Parker, ever oblivious, droned on about the importance of attendance just as I slipped into my seat at the back. I barely settled in when Sarah, draped in her latest fashionable outfit, sauntered in, her entourage in tow. Nice of you to join us, Nellie. We were worried you got lost in your closet of hand-me-downs. Sarah quipped loudly, tossing her hair as she passed my desk. A chorus of laughter followed. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks. Just leave me alone. I shot back quietly, more to my desk than to her. What was that, Nellie? Speak up, we can't hear you, Sarah taunted, turning to face me with a smirk. I shook my head, choosing silence over a battle I couldn't win. The bell rang, a temporary reprieve, but the relief was short-lived. Each class transition felt like running a gauntlet, with Sarah and her crew lying in wait to hurl their next insult or snide comment. Lunchtime was no sanctuary either. I found a secluded spot under an old oak tree, a safe distance from the cafeteria's chaos and cruelty. As I nibbled on my sandwich, thoughts of just disappearing consumed me. Hey, why you sitting all by yourself here? A voice interrupted my solitude. I looked up to see Jake, a guy from my English class. He wasn't one of Sarah's crowd, but I was wary all the same. Just like the quiet, I replied, hoping he'd take the hint and leave me be. He shrugged, unfazed, and sat down beside me. Suit yourself. Sarah's being a real piece of work, huh? I was taken aback by his bluntness. You could say that, I admitted, surprised by my own candor. Listen, Nellie, you can't let her get to you. She's all talk, Jake said, his tone earnest. I wanted to believe him, to find the strength to stand up to Sarah, but the words felt like a distant dream. Easier said than done, I mumbled, my gaze fixed on the grass below. The bell, signaling the end of lunch, snapped me out of my reverie. Gathering my things, I offered Jake a small smile. Thanks for, sitting with me. No problem. See you around, Nellie, he said, heading back to the building. The rest of the day passed in a blur. With each class, I counted down the minutes until I could escape back to the safety of my home. But the day wasn't without its lessons. Jake's unexpected kindness was a glimmer of hope, a reminder that not everyone was against me. School had become a nightmare for me, one I couldn't wake up from. Every day was a repeat of the last, dodging insults, hiding from Sarah and her gang, and trying, unsuccessfully, to blend into the background. It wasn't long before the stress of it all started to take a real toll on me. I found myself feeling physically sick, my old ailments flaring up with a vengeance, alongside new ones. Headaches, stomachaches, you name it, I had it. I was a mess, inside and out. One evening, I was curled up on the sofa, a blanket wrapped around me, trying to shake off the latest in a long line of migraines when Grandma came over. She had this way of seeing right through you, and that day was no different. Nellie, this isn't just about being sick, is it? She asked, her voice soft but firm. I tried to shrug it off. I'm fine, Grandma. Just tired. She wasn't having any of it. Nonsense. You're sick, yes, but it's not just physical, is it? It's those kids at school, isn't it? I hesitated, then the floodgates opened. I told her everything about Sarah, the bullying, the constant dread that filled my days. Grandma listened, her expression growing more concerned by the minute. When I finished, she sighed deeply. Nellie, your body is reacting to your stress and anxiety. It's making you ill. All these problems with your classmates are affecting your health. I was stunned. Could my being bullied be the reason I was always sick? Seeing my confusion, Grandma explained further. Stress can have a real, physical impact on your body. It's important we address not just the symptoms, but the cause as well. The next day, Grandma sat down with my parents and me to discuss a plan. It was clear that continuing to attend school wasn't an option, not if things stayed as they were. After much discussion, my parents decided to switch me to distance learning. It was a big change, but one that felt necessary. The difference was night and day. Away from the constant harassment and anxiety, I started to heal. My headaches became less frequent, my stomach settled, and I found myself actually able to concentrate on my studies without the looming shadow of Sarah and her taunts. I was sitting at the kitchen table one afternoon, working through a set of math problems, when Mom came in to make a cup of tea. She watched me for a moment, then said, "You seem different, Nellie. Better. Happier, even." I hadn't really thought about it, but she was right. "I guess I am," I admitted. "It's weird not having to worry about what's going to happen at school every day." Mom nodded, a relieved smile spreading across her face. "I'm just glad to see you feeling better. We should have done this sooner." The transition wasn't without its challenges. I missed the few friends I had, and adjusting to a new way of learning took time. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I found myself grateful for the change. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. One morning, as I logged onto my first virtual class, my mom knocked softly on my door. "Nellie, you okay with this? Missin' your friends?" she asked, peeking in with a concerned look. I paused, considering. "Kinda," I admitted. "But it's better than before. At least I can focus now." She nodded, her eyes softening. "You just shout if you need anything, okay? I'm right downstairs." As the days turned into weeks, I found a rhythm to my new routine. The subjects I used to struggle with began to make sense, thanks to the absence of distractions and the patient guidance of my online teachers. One afternoon, after a particularly successful math session, my dad came home early and found me at my desk. "Look at you, assing your classes without those bullies breathing down your neck," he said with a grin, ruffling my hair. I couldn't help but smile back. "Feels weird, Dad." "Good weird, though. Like, I can actually do this." "That's 'cause you can, Nellie. Always could," he replied, pride evident in his voice. Yet, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The lack of social interaction began to weigh on me. I missed the face-to-face conversations, even the ones that weren't always kind. The silence of the house, once a sanctuary, started to feel more like a cage. I started to look for ways to fill the social void. I joined online study groups and even started a virtual book club with a few classmates I'd reconnected with. It wasn't the same as hanging out in person, but it helped. One evening, as I closed my laptop after a long study session, my grandma called. "How's my favorite granddaughter?" she asked, her voice warm and comforting. "I'm your only granddaughter, Grandma," I teased, smiling at our ongoing joke. Details, she chuckled. "How's the distance learning going?" "It's good, actually. I mean, I miss seeing people, but I'm doing better in school now," I shared, feeling a sense of achievement. "That's my girl. You're stronger than you know, Nellie. Don't forget that," she said, her words lifting my spirits. Prom night was something I had dreaded for months. The very idea of attending filled me with anxiety. My parents, however, thought it would be good for me, a chance to close this chapter on a high note, as they put it. Despite my protests, I found myself nodding along to their encouragement. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, Nellie. You might regret not going, Mom said, her eyes hopeful. I couldn't bring myself to argue further, even though every fiber of my being screamed against it. So, there I was, in a simple dress that my mom and I had picked out, standing awkwardly at the back of the gym, trying my best to blend in with the walls. The gym was transformed, barely recognizable, with all the decorations and lights. Groups of my classmates, all dressed up, were laughing and dancing, enjoying the night. I couldn't help but feel like an outsider, watching the festivities from my lonely corner. As the evening dragged on, I decided to make a quiet exit. No one would notice I was gone anyway. But just as I was about to slip out, Sarah, in her stunning dress, blocked my path. Leaving so soon, Nellie? The party's just starting, she sneered, her voice dripping with malice. I tried to step around her, but she shoved me back, a little too forcefully. Watch where you're going, she hissed, her eyes gleaming with cruelty. The sudden push caught me off guard, and I stumbled, drawing the attention of those nearby. In seconds, I was surrounded by Sarah's friends, their laughter piercing the loud music. Look at her, can barely stand straight, one of them mocked, pointing directly at me. Sarah leaned in closer, her voice loud enough for her circle to hear. Guess some things never change, huh, Nellie? Always the clumsy one. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and something else, anger, maybe, or just a deep, aching sadness. Just leave me alone, Sarah, I managed to say, my voice shaky but loud. Oh, I will, don't worry. Wouldn't want to ruin my night by spending another minute with you, she retorted, her words like daggers. The group's laughter followed me as I turned and ran, not stopping until I was safely outside, away from their taunting faces. Tears blurred my vision as I made my way home, the night air doing little to cool my flushed cheeks. My parents were waiting up when I got home, their faces lighting up at the sight of me. But as they took in my tear-streaked face and the defeated slump of my shoulders, their smiles faded. What happened, honey? Mom asked, rushing over to me. I shook my head, unable to find the words to explain the humiliation and hurt. I just want to forget tonight ever happened, I whispered, the tears starting again as I let my parents wrap me in their arms, their concern and love a small comfort in the face of my pain. After the prom disaster, I was more than ready to put high school behind me. College was my chance to start fresh, to be someone new. I chose to study medicine, driven by a deep-seated desire to help others, maybe even understand a bit more about my own struggles through learning about the human body and mind. My first day at medical college felt like stepping onto another planet. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, talking about classes and future careers. I found myself outside the main lecture hall, clutching my schedule, when a girl next to me said, "Hey, you look lost too. First year?" "Yeah," I replied, grateful for the conversation. "Nellie," I introduced myself. "I'm Zoe. Nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted with a laugh. Zoe and I stuck together, finding our way to the lecture hall. Sitting down, I felt a nervous excitement bubble up inside me. This was it, my chance to really make something of myself. As weeks turned into months, I started to come into my own. I was doing well in my classes, even making a few friends. Zoe and I became inseparable, studying together and encouraging each other through the tough exams and endless assignments. Our hard work paid off, and I found myself thriving in a way I never had before. The subject of psychosomatic medicine particularly fascinated me, the idea that the mind could have such a profound effect on the body. It resonated with my own experiences, and I dove into the research with a passion. One day, after presenting a paper I'd written on stress and its physical manifestations, my professor pulled me aside. "Nellie, your work is impressive. Have you considered specializing in this field? I was taken aback. I hadn't really thought about it. He nodded thoughtfully. Think about it. You have a knack for understanding the complexities of the human mind and body. It's a rare gift. His encouragement bolstered my confidence, and I began to see a clear path ahead of me. I was going to use my past, my struggles, and turn them into something positive. I was going to help people heal, not just physically but emotionally too. As the years passed, I graduated from medical college with honors, my sights set on specializing in psychosomatic medicine. My family was proud, and I, for the first time in a long time, was proud of myself too. I had turned my life around, and I was ready to face whatever came next with a newfound strength and determination. Zoe hugged me tight on graduation day. Look at us, we made it. Yeah, we did, I said, smiling. Here's to new beginnings. And as we threw our caps into the air, I felt a sense of closure. The hurt and isolation of my past were behind me. Ahead lay a future full of possibilities, a chance to make a real difference. And I was ready for it, more ready than I'd ever been. After pouring years into researching the profound effects of psycho-emotional stress on the body, my work started gaining traction. I'd written extensively on how the turmoil of our minds could physically manifest, leading to real, often severe health issues. Stress, anxiety, the grind of daily life, it all could lead to negative reactions within the body, spiraling into chronic conditions. What fascinated me most was finding ways to reverse or manage these effects by addressing the root, the mind state. This journey of mine caught the eyes and ears of the medical community. Invitations flooded in, asking me to share my findings with peers, specialists, and even skeptics. It wasn't long before my name became somewhat of a buzzword in medical circles, a symbol of a fresh perspective on holistic healing. My big break came when I was invited as a speaker at the annual health conference. The topic I chose, the mind-body connection, psycho-emotional stress and physical health, struck a chord. As I spoke, I could see the realization dawn on many faces. This wasn't just theory, it was reality affecting countless lives. I walked off that stage to a sea of applause, my heart racing not from fear, but exhilaration. I'd overcome my dread of public speaking, facing down an auditorium packed with professionals, and I'd held my own. The buzz from my presentation didn't just end with applause. Post-conference, an invitation came my way that would have seemed unimaginable years ago, a dinner with the who's who of the health sector. Government officials, insurance bigwigs, clinic heads, and industry specialists, all were to be there. As the day of the dinner approached, a mix of excitement and nerves took over. This was more than just a meal, it was a networking goldmine, a chance to discuss potential collaborations, to take my work to the next level. I stood in front of my mirror, makeup in hand, determined to look my best. I wasn't just representing my research, I was representing myself, my journey. I chose my dress carefully, the one that always made me feel confident and at ease. As I applied my makeup, I allowed myself a moment to reflect on the significance of this evening. It wasn't about looking no worse than the other women there, it was about feeling my best, about walking into that restaurant with my head held high, knowing I belonged. At this elegant dinner, surrounded by the health sector's elite, I felt like I was finally where I belonged. Compliments flowed my way, each one boosting my confidence more than the last. As the evening wound down, I decided it was time to head home, still riding the high of the night's successes. But as I made my way through the hallway, a familiar voice stopped me in my tracks. It was her, Sarah, my high school nightmare. Wow, look at you. Finally figured out how to dress, huh? Sarah's voice, laced with that same condescending tone, filled the space between us. I turned to face her, finding her just as beautiful and just as arrogant as she'd been back in school. The years had changed us both, but it seemed her spirit remained untouched by time. Long time no see, Sarah, I said calmly. Sarah laughed, a sound that once would have sent me spiraling into anxiety. Seriously, though, how much did you have to borrow to afford a night here? This place isn't cheap. I met her gaze, steady and calm. The fear and insecurity she once inspired in me had long since faded, replaced by a strength forged in overcoming and succeeding, despite people like her. Before I could respond, the organizer of the dinner, Mr. Thompson, approached, his concern evident. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking from me to Sarah. I nodded, offering him a smile. "Yes, thank you. Just catching up with an old classmate." Sarah, fueled by alcohol and unchecked pride, continued her tirade, oblivious to the discomfort she was causing. She even went as far as to bring her husband into the mix, beckoning him over with the promise of joining in on her mockery. However, the moment her husband, who I recognized as the director of a company interested in my research, realized the situation, his demeanor changed drastically. "I'm so sorry," he began, his apology directed at me with a sincerity that took me by surprise. "My wife's behavior is unacceptable." He then turned to Sarah, his frustration boiling over. "Do you realize what you've done? You're jeopardizing important opportunities with your behavior. I've been looking forward to collaborating with Dr. Nellie Stewart here, and you're here making a scene." The sight of him leading Sarah away, her protests echoing down the hallway, was surreal. Moments later, he returned alone, his expression apologetic. "I can't tell you how sorry I am for my wife's behavior," he said, his voice earnest. "I hope this doesn't affect our potential collaboration. Your work is invaluable." After the dinner, as I was leaving, I saw her, my former tormentor from school, sitting outside on the steps, her makeup smudged from tears. She looked up as I approached, her eyes red and puffy. "Hey, can you talk to him for me? You seem to have his ear," she hiccuped, her voice a mix of desperation and vodka. I paused, looking down at her. This was the girl who made my life a living hell back in the day, now asking for my help. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'm not getting involved," I said firmly. "This is between you and him." "But you're like, doing so well." "He listens to you," she persisted, stumbling over her words. "That doesn't make it my business," I replied, my tone leaving no room for further discussion. I left her there, on the steps, a mess of her own making. Walking home, I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. I had come full circle, from the girl who was bullied, to someone who stood her ground, unafraid. The news of her divorce came through the grapevine. I'd be lying if I said it didn't give me a sense of vindication. As for me, life was looking up. I had found someone, a man who appreciated me for who I was, someone kind and interesting. We were talking about a future together, something I never thought I'd have. Continuing my work, I felt more motivated than ever. My experiences, both past and present, fueled my passion and my resolve to make a difference. It was a strange journey, but it led me here, to a place of happiness and contentment. And for that, I was grateful. My name's Hannah, and if you ask me, my life's pretty standard. Got a decent job, a husband, Mark, who's been my rock since college, and 2 kids who are the usual blend of sweet and trouble. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that normalcy is a fragile thing, especially with a brother like Alex. Alex is 8 years younger than me, the kind of guy who never really grew up. Jobs, girlfriends, you name it, he changes them like he's flipping channels on TV. And yeah, he's got this habit of hitting up me or mom whenever his wallet's feeling too light, which is always. So, there we were, at mom's for our usual Sunday dinner. The house smelled like roast and the kids were running around, when the door slammed open like it's trying to break free. In strolls Alex, with this girl on his arm, looking like she just walked off a beach rather than into a family gathering. Her dress was so short, I swear Mark did a double take, nearly choked on his tea. "Family, meet Lisa," Alex announces, all proud like he's won an award. "My fiancé. And guess what? We're gonna have a baby." The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Mark's coughing his lungs out, mom's frozen with her mouth half open, and I'm just staring, thinking, here we go again. "Alex, are you out of your damn mind?" I couldn't help myself. You can barely take care of yourself. Lisa, hands on her hips, eyes me like I'm something she stepped in. We're very happy, thank you. And we don't need negativity, right, babe? Alex nods, slinging an arm around her. Yeah, we're doing great. Right, Mom? Mom, bless her, is trying to find her words. Congratulations. But, Alex, have you thought this through? A baby is a big responsibility. Of course, he hasn't, I muttered, earning a glare from both of them. Listen here, Hannah. Alex shot back. I don't need a lecture from you. We're gonna be fine. Right, Lisa? Lisa smirks. Absolutely. And we'll need a bit of help, obviously. Starting with living here for a while. I almost choked on my own spit. Live here? With Mom? Are you kidding? Why not? Lisa snapped. It's not like we have anywhere else to go. And it's not forever, just until Alex finds a new job. And when will that be? I couldn't stop the sarcasm. You planning on hitting the job hunt hard between gaming sessions, Alex? He just shrugged, all casual like. I'll figure it out. I always do. Mom finally spoke up, trying to smooth things over. Well, we'll make do. We always do. Right, Hannah? I looked at her, at the resignation in her eyes, and my heart sank. Yeah, Mom. We always do. Dinner was tense after that. Mark kept giving me these looks, like he was bracing for the storm he knew was coming. And me? I was just trying to wrap my head around the circus my life was about to become. After dinner, with the kids in bed and Mark helping Mom with the dishes, I cornered Alex in the living room. You can't keep doing this, you know. Dumping your problems on Mom on me. It's not fair. Alex, lounging like he owned the place, just shrugged. What do you want me to say, Hannah? Life's tough. I'm doing my best. Your best? I was fuming. Dragging a pregnant girl into this mess? Expecting everyone else to pick up your slack? Hey, Lisa yelled from the kitchen. Watch how you talk about us. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. Arguing wasn't going to solve anything. Not with Alex. Not now. Just, try to think about someone other than yourself for once, I finally said, more tired than angry. Alex just looked at me, and for a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something like guilt. But then he smiled, that carefree, reckless smile that always spelled trouble. We'll manage, sis. We always do. As I went to help with the dishes, leaving Alex to his illusions, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all on the brink of something big. And not in a good way. But like Mom said, we'd make do. Because that's what families do, right? Even when they're about to be turned upside down by one of their own. Having Alex and Lisa move in was like inviting a hurricane into your house and hoping it'd just water the plants. From day one, the balance of our family home was thrown off. Mom tried to stay upbeat, but I could see the strain in her eyes. One morning, I dropped by to see Mom, and the scene was chaos. Dishes piled up, laundry forgotten, and Lisa lounging on the couch like she owned the place, scrolling through her phone. Alex was nowhere to be seen, probably asleep or pretending to be. Morning, Lisa, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Need help with anything? She barely glanced up. Oh, no, I'm good. Just resting. You know, for the baby. Right. The baby. I looked around at the mess. And Alex? She shrugged. Asleep, maybe? I don't keep tabs on him. Of course not. Why start now? I sighed and started picking up. Mom came in, her smile a bit too forced. Hannah, you don't have to do that. I don't mind, Mom. Can't have you dealing with all this alone. Lisa watched us, not moving an inch. You're so good to your mom, she said, and I couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic. Someone's got to be, I muttered, throwing a glance her way. She just smiled, unfazed. Later, I caught Alex in the kitchen, raiding the fridge. "Nice of you to join the living," I snapped. "Your fiancée's made herself right at home." He grabbed a soda, not looking at me. "Yeah, well, she's pregnant. Needs to rest." "And you? What's your excuse?" He leaned against the counter, all casual-like. "I'm looking for work, alright? It's not easy out there." Could have fooled me. "Seems like your full-time job is avoiding responsibility." He rolled his eyes, cracking open his soda. "Why you always gotta be on my case, Hannah?" "I'm handling it." "By handling, you mean letting Mom clean up after you too?" He didn't have an answer to that. Just sipped his soda and shrugged. The final straw came when Lisa announced they wanted a small wedding at the house. "Nothing fancy," she said, laying out plans that sounded anything but. "Just something memorable." I looked at Mom, who was trying to hide her worry. "And how do you plan to pay for this small wedding?" Alex jumped in. "We thought Mom could help, you know, as a gift." I laughed. It was that or scream. "You're joking, right? You want more from her?" Lisa stood up, hands on her hips. "It's not like we're asking for much. Just a little help." "A little help?" I was fuming now. "You've done nothing but take since you got here. Mom's on a fixed income and you're planning a wedding like she's made of money." Alex tried to intervene. "Hannah, come on, it's just..." "No, Alex. Enough is enough. You two need to start taking responsibility for your own lives. Mom's not your personal ATM." Lisa's face went red, and for a moment, I thought she'd yell. But she just scoffed. "Fine. We'll figure it out ourselves." "Yeah," I said. "You do that." Walking out, I told Mom, "Don't let them bully you into paying for anything. It's time they learned the value of money." Mom nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to help Alex, but knew it wasn't helping in the long run. That night, Mark and I talked it over. "You can't keep fighting their battles, Hannah," he said, and I knew he was right. But it wasn't just about fighting battles, it was about protecting Mom from being taken advantage of. The next day, I made it clear to Alex and Lisa. "You're adults. It's time to act like it. No more handouts. You want a wedding, a life, you work for it." Their response was a mix of shock and anger, but I stood firm. This was the wake-up call they needed, whether they appreciated it or not. The addition of a new family member should have been a joyous occasion, and in a way, it was. Lisa gave birth to a beautiful boy, a bundle of joy that brought a rare smile to everyone's faces, especially Mom's. She was over the moon, completely taken with her new grandson. But the joy was a double-edged sword. It was Mom, not Alex or Lisa, who ended up doing most of the caring for the little one. Watching her juggle her grandson alongside everything else was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Alex and Lisa's approach to parenting was, let's just say, hands-off. While Mom cooed and cuddled the baby, Alex was glued to his computer screen, and Lisa was out more often than not, treating the mall like her personal playground. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Life at Mom's had spiraled into a daily soap opera, minus the scripted resolution at the end of each episode. On one of my visits, I caught Mom poring over a pile of receipts that could easily be mistaken for a novel, with expenses that made my eyes water. Designer outfits, jewelry, luxury items that screamed extravagance from miles away. And there was Alex, ensconced in his virtual world, oblivious to the real one crumbling around him, his newborn son a mere background to his gaming adventures. "Alex, isn't it about time you hit pause and maybe, I don't know, looked for a job?" My attempt at lightheartedness did nothing to pierce his focus. He grunted something unintelligible, not once tearing his gaze from the screen. Working on it, he mumbled, the same old song and dance. "And Lisa? This," I gestured to the mountain of receipts, "isn't exactly helping." He shrugged, a gesture that conveyed a universe of indifference. I rounded on Mom. How can you just sit by and watch them drain you like this? Mom sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of the world. It's only money, Hannah. I can't lose my grandson over it. That's when Lisa waltzed in, arms laden with shopping bags, a triumphant grin plastered across her face. Nothing like a little retail therapy, she announced, dropping her spoils on the table as if she'd returned from a successful hunt. Therapy? More like grand larceny. Mom can't keep this up, Lisa. Her eyes narrowed to slits, her voice cold and sharp as ice. Perhaps we should just leave, then. Let's see how often Mom gets to see her grandson after that. The threat hung in the air, a toxic cloud that threatened to choke us all. I looked to Mom for a sign of outrage, but she met my gaze with a resigned shake of her head, a silent plea to drop it. Later, in the sanctuary of the kitchen, I tried again. You can't let them use you like this, Mom. It's not right. She continued her tea ritual, a calming contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. I know, dear. But what choice do I have? That's my grandson. There has to be a line, Mom. They're walking all over you. She handed me a cup of tea, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity one rarely saw. I'll handle it, Hannah. Trust me, I've got this under control. Control? The word tasted bitter. Seems more like they're controlling you. She patted my hand, a gesture meant to soothe. Just trust me, dear. As I left, the image of Alex lost in another world while Lisa admired her latest shiny trinket, not at me. Mom might think she had a handle on things, but from where I stood, it looked like we were all being dragged down by their weight. The trouble started when Mom got sick out of nowhere. One day she was fine, the next, she was rushed to the hospital with what turned out to be a serious condition. I was there in a heartbeat, barely had time to grab my purse before I was out the door. The hospital became my second home, sitting by her bed, holding her hand, and praying she'd pull through. I called Alex, tried to get through to him and Lisa, telling them, Mom's sick, she's in the hospital. You need to come, now. But all I got back were excuses. We're a bit tied up right now, Hannah. You know how it is, Alex would say, or Lisa would chime in with, we've got plans already. Can't just drop everything. Plans. Right. Their social calendar was apparently more important than their sick mother lying in a hospital bed. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't understand how they could just carry on with their lives, partying and living it up, while Mom was fighting for hers. I was running on fumes, between my job, the kids, and now this. But I didn't have the luxury of being tied up or having plans. Mom needed me, so that's where I was. Every day, hoping for some improvement, for her to wake up and tell me everything would be okay. 2 months of this hell, and then, just as sudden as she fell ill, she was gone. I was there, holding her hand, telling her I loved her, that I'd look after everything, not to worry. And where were Alex and Lisa? Out. Living their life without a care in the world, not even bothering to see if Mom, or their son for that matter, needed them. The funeral was a blur of faces, condolences, and the overwhelming feeling of loss. But Lisa, in her barely there black dress, managed to stand out, drawing disapproving looks and whispers from everyone. Alex was just as detached, showing no sign of grief, almost as if he was relieved it was all over. The day after, I went to Mom's house, needing to feel her presence, but I was met with Lisa's sneering face. Looking for something, Hannah? She mocked, blocking the doorway. I need to get some of Mom's things, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, I think you're mistaken. This is our house now. You have no business here, she replied, smirking. Alex came up behind her, a smug look on his face. Yeah, Hannah, Mom changed her will. Everything's ours now. Maybe you should have spent less time at the hospital and more time securing your inheritance. I was speechless, anger and disbelief swirling inside me. You can't be serious. Mom wouldn't do that. He shrugged, enjoying every moment of my distress. Believe what you want. But you're not welcome here. Lisa laughed, enjoying the spectacle. Guess you should have been nicer to us, huh? Their cruelty hit me hard, but I wasn't about to show them how much. We'll see what the notary says about this, I managed to say, my voice cold. Good luck with that, Alex called out as I walked away, their laughter echoing behind me. A week after the whole funeral drama, we all ended up in the notary's office, a place I never thought I'd be fighting a family battle. The air was thick with tension, you could cut it with a knife. Alex and Lisa were smirking like they already won the lottery, but I had a card up my sleeve they didn't see coming. The notary cleared his throat, and the room went dead silent. The will Mr. Alex Kramer has been referring to, he began, eyeing my brother, is not the final will. Your mother made another visit here, with Hannah, to draft the final document. Lisa's face turned a shade I didn't know existed. What the hell does that mean? She spat, her voice like venom. It means, I said, my voice steady, that Mom knew better. She left the house to me, not you two. The notary nodded. Indeed. The house goes to Hannah. Alex jumped up, his face red. That's bullshit. She wouldn't do that. Lisa was on her feet too, screaming insults at me that would make a sailor blush. The notary raised his hand, calling for silence. There's more. If it's found that there was any pressure applied to change the will, legal actions could be taken. Alex, still fuming, shot back. I'm her son too. I deserve half of everything. The notary, unfazed, pulled out another document. Your mother anticipated such a claim. Hence, she divided her money into 2 equal parts. However, he paused, looking directly at Alex. She deducted from your share all the money you and your wife have received during your marriage. You could hear a pin drop. How much is left then? Alex's voice was barely a whisper. $10,000, the notary replied. Lisa's scream could probably be heard a mile away. 10,000? That's it? I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. Mom had seen through their greed. Seems like Mom knew what she was doing, I said, more to myself than anyone else. Alex and Lisa were in shock, their dreams of easy money shattered in an instant. The notary suggested they leave before things got uglier, and they did, but not before throwing a few more choice words my way. After the showdown at the notary, things escalated pretty quick. Alex and his wife, Lisa, were set on clinging to Mom's house like they owned the place. It was a mess, a proper circus show, until it got so heated that I had no choice but to call the cops. Never thought I'd see the day where I'd have to drag police into family drama, but there we were. When they finally left, under the watchful eyes of the police, the air in the house felt different, heavier somehow. Mark and I started the grim task of taking inventory, noting the gaps where things used to be. It was clear as day, they'd been selling off Mom's things. My heart sank. How could they? I was livid, ready to drag them through the courts. I can't believe this, Mark. They've stolen from us, from Mom. We should sue them for everything they've got left. Mark, ever the voice of reason, put a hand on my shoulder. Hannah, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But think about it. Maybe, just maybe, they'll use that money for something good. For the kid. His words hit me harder than I expected. It was a slim hope, clinging to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally start acting like responsible adults for their child's sake. It didn't make what they did right, but it gave me a sliver of hope that maybe the cycle would break with their son. Deep down, I knew Mark was right. Pursuing them legally would just drag us all through more mud, and for what? The chance at a few dollars and more heartache? No, it was time to let go, to move forward and focus on healing, on building something better from the wreckage they left behind. So, I let it go, not for them, but for me, for us. It was time to close this chapter and start anew, with the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd find their way. Months rolled by in silence, a welcome break from the chaos that had enveloped our lives. But peace has a way of being fleeting. Word got to me that Alex and Lisa had sunk further, living in some rundown apartment, scraping by. Alex was jumping from one odd job to the next, and Lisa? She was chasing after rich men, leaving their little boy, my nephew, pretty much on his own. Hearing that, it felt like a punch to the gut. That kid deserved better, so much better than what those two could ever offer him. I started gathering the paperwork, the legal documents needed to strip them of their parental rights. It was a heavy decision, but every fiber of my being told me it was the right one. That boy needed a real family, stability, and I was determined to give it to him. When I finally approached Alex and Lisa with the idea, bracing for a fight, their reaction took me by surprise. They were indifferent. Almost relieved to be rid of the responsibility. "You sure about this, Hannah?" Alex asked, no hint of the brother I once knew in his eyes. "You know, taking on a kid is a lot." I couldn't hide my disgust, my disappointment. "He's your son, Alex. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Lisa, ever the opportunist, chimed in with a shrug. "If you think you can give him a better life, then why not? We've got our own lives to figure out." Their casual dismissal of their flesh and blood boiled my blood, but I swallowed the anger. This was about him, not them. "Yeah, I'm sure. More than you've ever been about anything. He'll be loved and cared for. That's more than what you've ever offered him." The paperwork was straightforward, their signatures quick and emotionless. As I walked away, documents in hand, it was a bittersweet victory. That little boy was going to have a chance now, a real family with me and Mark. It's been a stretch of quiet months, a silence from Alex and Lisa that spoke volumes. They vanished off the grid, no calls answered, no trace of them at their last known spot. I've toyed with the idea of getting the authorities involved, wondering if a missing poster is the next step. Meanwhile, our home's been filled with a different kind of noise, the joyful chaos of kids and their boundless energy. Our little nephew, now effectively my third child, has settled in as if he's always been here. My kids, bless them, have taken to him like ducks to water, showering him with the kind of love and attention that's both heartwarming and a tad overwhelming. "We're gonna build the biggest fort this living room has ever seen," declares my eldest, rallying the troops with a sparkle in her eyes that could outshine the sun. The little one, barely understanding but eager all the same, claps his hands with glee, a toothy grin plastered across his face. "Fort, fort," he echoes, stumbling over the words, but clear in his enthusiasm. Mark and I, we've moved into Mom's old house, a sprawling place that seemed too vast once, but now feels just right. There's a room for every mood, a space for every laughter, and a corner for every whispered secret. It's become a home in the truest sense, filled with memories we're making fresh each day. "I never thought we'd fill this place up," I muse aloud one evening, watching the kids turn the living room into a labyrinth of cushions and blankets. Mark wraps an arm around me, pulling me close. "We always had the space, just needed the right people to fill it." And he's right. This house, once echoing with the past, now thrums with the present and whispers promises of the future. As for Alex and Lisa, their absence is a void, but not one that sucks the life out of us. If anything, it's given us a clarity, a purpose. We've built something solid, something real, out of the wreckage they left behind. We've turned a page, started a new chapter. And in this story, we're all exactly where we're meant to be. I was at that cozy little dive bar downtown when I first bumped into Alex. My friend, Jess, dragged me there after work, promising it'd be a chill night. Little did I know, it would change everything. "Come on, Tasha, it'll be fun. Plus, you need to get out more," Jess had insisted, her arm looped through mine as we navigated through the crowded space, filled with the hum of conversations and the occasional clink of glasses. I was scanning the room, taking in the mismatched furniture and dim lighting, when I accidentally collided with someone. "Watch where you're going," I blurted out, before even looking up. "Sorry about that," a deep, amused voice responded. It was Alex. His apology came with a grin that, despite my irritation, I found disarmingly charming. Jess, ever the social butterfly, jumped in. "Oh, hey Alex. Didn't know you hung out here too. This is my friend I've been telling you about." Alex extended his hand, still smiling. "Nice to meet you, I'm Alex. Seems like fate's got a funny way of introducing us." I shook his hand, feeling a weird mix of annoyance and curiosity. "I'm Tasha. I'm sure fate's got better things to do," I retorted, trying to match his casual demeanor. We found a table, and the night unfolded with laughter and stories. Alex worked as a manager at a car company, a job that seemed to suit his confident, easygoing nature. "You gotta roll with the punches, you know? Can't let the small stuff get you down," he said at one point, shrugging off a question about work stress. I talked about my job as a kindergarten teacher, how every day was a mix of chaos and joy. Kids are brutally honest, no filters whatsoever. "But it's refreshing, keeps you grounded," I explained. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn to Alex's straightforwardness and sense of humor. He didn't mince words, and neither did I. It was comfortable talking to him. "You two seem to hit it off," Jess teased, nudging me as Alex went to grab us another round of drinks. "I guess he's not too bad," I conceded, watching him navigate through the crowd with an ease that seemed to come naturally to him. When Alex returned, he handed me a beer, our fingers brushing slightly. "Thought you might like this one. It's my favorite." "Thanks," I said, taking a sip. It was good, actually. "So, what's a car company manager doing in a dive bar like this? Shouldn't you be at some fancy cocktail place?" Alex laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. "Nah, this is more my speed. Real people, real conversations. None of that pretentious crap." The night ended with promises to meet up again, no specifics, just a mutual understanding that we'd both like that. As Jess and I walked back to her car, she nudged me. "See? I told you it'd be fun." And we didn't disappoint her by getting married 6 months later. After 5 years of trying and failing to start a family, life decided to throw us another curveball. My father-in-law, the one person in Alex's family who'd always been kind to me, passed away. That left Eleanor, my mother-in-law, all alone in that big, creaky mansion of hers. Alex thought it'd be a good idea to move in with her. "It's the right thing to do," he'd said one night, trying to sound convincing. "She's all alone now, and we can save some money on rent." I wasn't buying it. "Live with Eleanor? Are you out of your mind? She's made it pretty clear she can't stand me," I shot back, frustration boiling over. Our apartment might have been cramped, but it was our space, free from judgmental glares and snide remarks about my inability to conceive. Alex sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I know it's not ideal, but she's my mom and she needs us. Plus, we're barely scraping by as it is." I knew he was right about the money, but the thought of facing Eleanor's cold shoulder every day was like agreeing to live in a lion's den. "Fine," I finally agreed, but the minute she starts in on me about not having kids, I'm not holding back. The day we moved in, Eleanor greeted us with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome," she said, her voice as chilly as the drafty halls of the mansion. "I suppose we'll have to make do with each other." "Thanks, Mom. We really appreciate it," Alex replied, ever the diplomat. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The first few weeks were tough. Eleanor made no secret of her displeasure at having me around. "You're doing it all wrong," she'd snipe as I tried to navigate my way around the kitchen or tidy up the living room. Her words were like barbs, each one a reminder that I was an outsider in her world. One evening, as I was attempting to make dinner, Eleanor came in, watching me like a hawk. "You're cutting the vegetables too big," she commented, her voice dripping with disdain. I clenched the knife a little tighter, my patience wearing thin. "Well, Eleanor, why don't you show me how it's done, then? Since you're the expert," I shot back, the words bitter on my tongue. she huffed, crossing her arms over her chest. I shouldn't have to. A proper wife would know how to do these things. That was the last straw. Look, I'm here because your son asked me to be, not because I enjoy your company. So, how about you back off and let me cook? Eleanor looked taken aback, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize, but then she turned on her heel and left the kitchen, muttering something about ungrateful children. A few months into our living arrangement with Eleanor, Alex hit me with a bombshell over breakfast. I've been thinking, maybe you should quit your job and stay home, he said, not meeting my eye. I almost choked on my coffee. Quit my job? Why on earth would I do that? He shuffled his feet, looking uncomfortable. Well, with Mom's health and all, we need someone to take care of her. And the house. It's a lot, and hiring a nurse plus a housekeeper? That's gonna drain us dry. I was floored. So, you want me to become what? A full-time maid and nurse? The thought of leaving my job, the kids I taught, it felt like he was asking me to give up a part of myself. It's not like that, Alex protested. It's just temporary. Until we figure something else out. I spent days mulling over it, arguing back and forth. In the end, the financial logic won out, but it felt like defeat. Fine, I'll do it. But this is temporary, right? I said, the word temporary tasting bitter. Transitioning from a kindergarten teacher to a full-time housewife was rough. I missed the chaos of the classroom, the joy of seeing a child's eyes light up when they learned something new. Instead, I found myself knee-deep in laundry, dust, and the endless task of trying to please Eleanor. At first, Eleanor seemed to take a perverse pleasure in critiquing my every move. You're not cleaning that right, she'd say, watching me struggle with the ancient vacuum cleaner that seemed to cough dust rather than collect it. Or during dinner, this chicken is dry. Didn't your mother teach you how to cook? I bit my tongue, reminding myself this was all temporary. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. Maybe it was the day Eleanor found me crying over a burnt casserole, or maybe she just got tired of eating poorly seasoned food, but she started to soften. Here, let me show you how to make my meatloaf, she offered one day, her voice lacking its usual sharpness. Alex always loved it as a boy. Cooking with Eleanor was a revelation. Under her guidance, I started to actually enjoy it. We found common ground in the kitchen, of all places. I even began reading to her, newspapers at first, then novels. Our conversations grew, branching out from the mundane to the personal. I learned about Alex as a child, about my father-in-law, about the history of the family I'd married into. I thought Alex would be pleased to see his mother and me getting along. Instead, he seemed more distant. That's great, he'd say, barely looking up from his phone when I told him about Eleanor's stories from his childhood, or the new recipe we'd mastered together. It was like he was there, but not really. Don't you care that your mom and I are finally getting along? I asked him one night, frustration boiling over. He looked up, surprised. Of course, I do. It's just, work's been crazy. You know how it is. But I didn't, not really. Our worlds were drifting apart, him with his late nights, and me with my days filled with cleaning, cooking, and caring for Eleanor. His detachment stung, a reminder of the gap that had opened up between us, a gap that no amount of housework or caregiving seemed able to bridge. As time went on, I couldn't help but notice Alex's behavior changing. He started coming home later and later, always saying work was to blame. It's just slammed at the office, he'd tell me, barely looking up from his dinner. It wasn't just the late nights, though. He began sleeping in the spare room, claiming he didn't want to disturb me with his restless nights. Then there was Sarah, Alex's sister, who seemed to enjoy poking fun at me whenever she visited. Nice place you've got here. Fits you perfectly, old and kinda sad, she'd say with a snicker, glancing around the mansion with disdain. Every time she showed up, it was like she had a sixth sense for when we were struggling the most. "Mom, I need some money," she'd demand, not even a hello. And like clockwork, Eleanor would open her purse, no questions asked. Eleanor's health was on a steady decline, and one day, it hit a new low. She couldn't even get herself into the bath. She called for Sarah, who was over at the time, but all she got was a cold shoulder. "I'm not here to bathe you, Mother." "Figure it out," Sarah snapped, before storming out. Hearing the hurt in Eleanor's voice as she cried broke something in me. I found her in her room, tears streaming down her face. "I'll help you," I said softly, putting aside the years of tension between us. From that day on, our relationship took a turn I never expected. She started opening up, treating me more like a daughter than an unwanted guest. Amidst all this, Alex dropped another bombshell. He'd bought an apartment near his work. "It's easier with the late hours. Saves me the commute," he explained one evening, almost as an afterthought. Curious, I asked to see it. "Can I visit? Just to see where you're staying?" His reaction was swift and sharp. "It's just a basic place, nothing to see. Not a museum." The real kicker came from Eleanor, of all people. One quiet afternoon, she pulled me aside, her voice barely above a whisper. "He bought that apartment with my money. Put it in my name, too. Even the utility bills come out of my account." I was stunned. How had things gotten to this point? The man I gave up my career for was leading a double life funded by his mother. And here I was, caught in the middle of a family I was trying to fit into, now bound by secrets and lies. The mansion, once a symbol of decay and neglected history, began its transformation on a chilly morning that promised change. I had spent countless nights researching, planning, and dreaming. The thought of Sarah's mocking words spurred me on, igniting a fire within me to prove her wrong. I approached Eleanor with my proposal, armed with sketches and color swatches. "Eleanor, I've been thinking," I started, hesitating only for a moment. "The house, it's beautiful, but it could use some love. What do you say we give it a bit of a facelift?" Eleanor peered at me over her reading glasses, the corners of her mouth twitching. "You want to fix up this old place?" she asked, skepticism woven through her words. "Yes, I think it could really brighten things up. Make it feel more like a home again," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. To my surprise, Eleanor warmed to the idea. "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to freshen things up a bit. Lord knows it's been ages since anything new happened around here." Encouraged by her agreement, I threw myself into the work. The days blurred into a symphony of paint splatters, wallpaper glue, and the screech of sandpaper against wood. Eleanor would often sit by, watching as I transformed her home, piece by piece. Sometimes, she'd even offer a tip or two, her tone softer, almost nostalgic. Back in my day, we would have chosen a more subdued color. But I must admit, this brightness brings a certain life to the room, Eleanor commented one afternoon as I stepped back to admire the newly painted living room walls. Eleanor couldn't hide her delight. She started inviting her old friends over, showing off the renovations with a pride I hadn't seen in her before. "Look what my daughter has done," she'd boast, her arm around me. It was the first time she'd ever referred to me that way in public, and it warmed my heart. Alex, however, was less than pleased. On one of his rare visits from his apartment, he walked around the house with a frown, inspecting my handiwork like a disapproving inspector. "What have you done to my house?" he finally exploded, anger in his voice. "You think you can just take over?" Before I could respond, Eleanor intervened. "This is still my house, and I say it's never looked better. She's done what none of us bothered to do for years," she declared, her voice sharp, leaving no room for argument. Alex's anger faltered under his mother's gaze, and without another word, he turned and left, the echo of his departure hanging heavy in the air. In the silence that followed, Eleanor turned to me, her expression softening. "Don't mind him. He doesn't understand. But I do. Thank you." The mansion's transformation was more than just a change of scenery, it was a rebirth, for the house and for us. In repairing its walls, I had somehow begun to mend the fabric of our family, weaving Eleanor and me closer together. The day Eleanor fell ill, everything changed. The doctors said it was a stroke, and suddenly, the mansion felt more like a tomb than a home. I was there, every day, at the hospital, holding her hand, talking to her even when she couldn't respond. Alex? Sarah? They were nowhere to be seen. It was as if they couldn't be bothered, their own mother lying there, a shadow of her former self. When Eleanor finally came home, it was a bittersweet victory. She was bedridden, a mere whisper of the formidable woman she once was. That's when Alex and Sarah decided to show up, not out of concern, but greed. I overheard them one day, in the drawing room, voices low but greedy. "The house should go to me," Alex was saying. "I'm the eldest. It only makes sense." Sarah snorted. "You think I'm just going to step aside? She promised me the jewelry, the antiques. I've got plans for those." Their mother, their own flesh and blood, was lying helpless, not 10 feet away, and here they were, divvying up her possessions like vultures circling a carcass. Fury boiled inside me. I stormed into the room, unable to hold back. "How dare you? She's still here, still fighting, and this is how you honor her? By fighting over her things like she's already gone?" They turned to me, surprise and irritation flashing in their eyes. "This is family business," Alex snapped. "Stay out of it." Sarah just sneered. "What would you know about it? You're just the help." But I wasn't just the help. I was the one who stayed by Eleanor's side, the one who cared. So, I did what they couldn't. I took care of her, day and night. I learned how to do the exercises the physiotherapist recommended, gently coaxing her limbs to move. I massaged her stiff muscles, encouraging circulation, whispering encouragement as if my words could heal. And slowly, miraculously, Eleanor began to improve. First, it was a flicker of movement, then a mumbled word. Days turned into weeks, and she started eating on her own, taking shaky steps around her room. Alex and Sarah couldn't hide their disappointment, their greedy plans crumbling as Eleanor regained her strength. "I don't understand," Alex muttered one day, watching his mother navigate the hallway with her walker. "I thought the doctor said." "They underestimated her," I cut in, not bothering to hide my disdain. "Seems like you did, too." Eleanor, for her part, seemed to thrive on proving them wrong. With every step, every word, she reclaimed a piece of herself that had been lost to the stroke. And I, who had once felt like an outsider in this family, found a sense of purpose and belonging I hadn't known I was missing. And then the unexpected happened, a second stroke, and Eleanor passed away. The day of the funeral was draped in a somber gray, the sky mourning Eleanor as much as any of us. The service had just ended, the air still thick with grief and whispered condolences, when Alex made his entrance. Not alone, but with a woman clutching his arm and 2 young children in tow. The whispers grew louder, curiosity and shock mingling in the air. "This is Marissa, my wife, and these are our kids," Alex introduced them, his voice devoid of the hesitation I'd expected. My world, already unsteady from loss, seemed to tilt further. "Your wife?" I echoed, the words bitter on my tongue. "And you think you can just waltz back here and take over?" Alex's gaze was defiant. "This is my family's home. We belong here." Sarah's laughter cut through the tension. "Looks like you're out, dear. Mum's money, the house, it's all going to be properly managed now." Their audacity left me reeling, but I was spared from responding by the arrival of the notary, a briefcase in hand. "If I may, it's time to read Eleanor's will." We gathered in the living room, the very heart of the mansion Eleanor had loved so dearly. The air was thick with anticipation and, on my part, a sliver of hope. Alex and Sarah were smirking, confident in their victory, until the notary's words shattered their expectations. "To my daughter-in-law, who has shown me more kindness and love than I could have ever expected, I leave my entire estate, including the mansion and all financial assets." The room went silent. Alex's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before, while Sarah's mouth hung open in disbelief. "This can't be right," Alex exploded. "She's manipulated everything." Sarah chimed in, her voice shrill. "You're nothing but a con artist." The notary, unfazed, pressed a button on a small device he'd pulled from his briefcase. Eleanor's voice filled the room, her image appearing on a screen. "I've made my decision with a clear mind," she said, looking directly into the camera. "My son and daughter have been absent, concerned more with what they could inherit than with me. But she has been by my side, caring, loving. She is my family." The video left Alex and Sarah speechless, their accusations dying on their lips. The revelation of Eleanor's true feelings, her acknowledgement of my loyalty and care, was a vindication I hadn't known I needed. Alex, defeated and angry, stormed out, Marissa and the children trailing behind him. Sarah, her dreams of wealth evaporated, slinked away without another word. The mansion, once a battleground of wills and familial duty, was now truly mine. But it felt hollow without Eleanor. I wandered its halls, her words echoing in my heart. She is my family. Starting fresh, right after the will reading that flipped my world upside down, I didn't waste any time. I filed for divorce from Alex faster than you'd believe. It was clear as day that whatever we had was buried under lies and betrayal. Plus, with the mansion and that apartment now legally mine, I had the grounds to kick him out. "You need to leave," I told him, my voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "The apartment, it's mine now. You and your new family need to find somewhere else." Alex tried to argue, his face red with anger and frustration. "You can't just throw us out. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." "You made your choices, Alex," I shot back, tired of his excuses, tired of the drama. He left, cursing under his breath, and that was that. He and his second family started hopping from one rental to another. I heard through the grapevine that it wasn't going well for him, but that piece of news didn't stir anything in me anymore. Adjusting to the quiet after the storm of betrayal and legal battles was no easy feat, but I found solace in the familiar walls of the mansion, now truly mine. It was during one of these quiet afternoons, as I was enjoying a rare moment of peace in the garden, that Sarah showed up, looking more worn down than I'd ever seen her. "Hey," she called out, her voice lacking its usual bite. "Can we talk?" I stood up, brushing the dirt from my hands. "Sure, Sarah. What's on your mind?" She shuffled her feet, looking anywhere but at me. "I'm in a bit of a bind. The debts, they're piling up, and She choked on her words, the bravado that had defined her now gone. I crossed my arms, the weight of her past actions hanging between us. "You're asking me for money." "It's not just for me. I've got nowhere else to turn," she admitted, finally meeting my gaze. The part of me that had endured her laughter, her scorn, wanted to turn her away. But standing there, I realized that holding on to anger would only weigh me down. "Sarah, I can't help you. Not after everything." Her face fell, the last shred of hope vanishing. I get it. I was horrible to you and Mom. I just thought, maybe it's time you faced the consequences of your actions." "Like I had to," I said, not unkindly. "You need to figure this out on your own." She nodded, a resigned acceptance in her posture. "Yeah, I guess I do." Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work, reconnecting with friends, and slowly rebuilding the life that had been upended. The mansion, once a battleground of familial strife, began to feel like a home again. I found joy in small things, like the way the morning light filtered through the windows or the laughter of friends gathered in the newly renovated kitchen. Alex and his new family, Sarah and her debts, became distant echoes of a life I had once been a part of. In letting go, I found peace and a sense of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. My life's been nothing short of a roller coaster, but whose isn't, right? Born to a dad who had to play both roles after my mom decided motherhood wasn't her gig, I grew up quick, learned tough, and got myself through college without much fuss. Dad was the real MVP, working odd jobs, making sure I had what I needed, and keeping me on the straight and narrow. After college, I packed up my life and moved to the city for a job that sounded way fancier than it was, manager at a car company. It was there, in the thick of engine oil and sales targets, that my path took a turn I never saw coming. The night I met Daniel, I was out with some work friends, blowing off steam at some dive bar that had more character than cleanliness. He walked in like he owned the place, and maybe in a way, he did, charming the socks off anyone within a 2-foot radius. Our eyes locked, and that was that. Fate, if you believe in that sort of thing. "Hey," he said, sliding up next to me at the bar. His smile was easy, his confidence infectious. "Hey yourself," I shot back, trying to match his vibe, but feeling my cheeks heat up. "Smooth, Erica, real smooth. What's a girl like you doing in a dump like this?" His tone was teasing, his grin wide. "Living the dream, clearly," I replied, rolling my eyes, but unable to keep the smirk off my face. "And you? Lost on your way to a GQ photo shoot?" He laughed, a sound that warmed me from the inside out. "Something like that. I'm Daniel, by the way." Erica. Shaking his hand felt like sealing some unspoken deal. Little did I know. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. The more we chatted, the more I realized Daniel was more than just a pretty face. He was smart, funny, and had a kind of sincerity that was hard to come by. When he asked for my number, I didn't think twice. Our whirlwind romance kicked off from there. Dates turned into weekends together, and before we knew it, 2 years had flown by. Daniel popped the question on a chilly evening in December, right in the middle of the street, with snow gently falling around us. It was so cliché, so unexpected, and so perfectly us. "Marry me, Erica. I'm a better man with you by my side," he said, his breath fogging in the cold air. I was speechless, a rare state for me. "Are you out of your mind? It's freezing, and you choose now to ask?" I teased, even as tears prickled at the corners of my eyes. "Would you have me any other way?" He grinned, dropping to one knee right there on the icy sidewalk. "In your dreams, Daniel. Of course, I'll marry you." And just like that, our new beginning started. After the whole knee-in-snow proposal scene, life with Daniel took on a new kind of normal. We were in that love bubble where even the burnt toast felt like a sign of our quirky domestic bliss. But as with any couple, the real world wasn't about to let us float too high without a reality check. "Erica, we've been trying for a while now. Maybe we should see a doctor, just to check everything's alright," Daniel said one evening, his voice laced with a concern he tried to mask with a casual shrug. I paused, the reality of our situation sinking in. "Yeah, I guess it wouldn't hurt. I just thought it would have happened by now, My voice trailed off, a mix of disappointment and worry creeping in. The tests were a blur of clinical words and sympathetic smiles. "Everything seems in order, but these things can sometimes take time," the doctor had said, offering a reassuring pat on the shoulder that felt more patronizing than comforting. Months turned into a year, and the strain began to show. Not just on me, but on us. Daniel was trying to be supportive, but the disappointment each month was a heavy silence we both carried. One night, after yet another negative test, Daniel found me on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, not really seeing anything. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down beside me and taking my hand. "Talk to me, Erica." I sighed, the weight of our struggles pressing down on me. "What if it never happens, Daniel? What if we can't have a baby?" Daniel squeezed my hand, his eyes meeting mine with a fierceness I hadn't expected. "Then we'll figure it out. Together. We always do." But I refused to believe that. "We're going to have a family, Erica, no matter what it takes." His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. "I love you, Daniel." I just hate seeing you disappointed. Disappointed? Erica, the only disappointment is seeing you this upset. We're in this together, remember? Screw everything else. And then, when we least expected it, the impossible happened. I was late, but not in the way I'd grown accustomed to each month, with a sinking heart. This time, hope flickered to life, cautious and fragile. Daniel, I called out, holding the pregnancy test in shaky hands. Can you come here? He appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. What's up? I held out the test to him, the positive sign glaring back at us in bold defiance of all the months of heartache. We're going to have a baby, I whispered, disbelief and joy mingling in my voice. Daniel's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. He scooped me up in his arms, spinning me around as he laughed, a sound so pure and full of happiness it brought tears to my eyes. I told you, Erica. I told you we'd make it happen. His voice was triumphant, his hold on me tight and reassuring. That night, we celebrated, just the two of us, talking about the future, our dreams for our child, and how we couldn't wait to meet the little person who had already changed our lives. Quitting my job wasn't an easy decision, but Daniel was pretty adamant about it. Babe, we need you focusing on the little one. We'll manage. I'll take care of everything else, he'd said, his tone leaving little room for argument. I knew he meant well, wanting to provide for us and ease my burden, but the reality of my days, filled with sickness and exhaustion, was far from what I'd imagined. Mornings were the worst. I'd wake up, run to the bathroom, and barely make it back to bed before the exhaustion hit me like a truck. It wasn't just the nausea, my whole body felt like it was rebelling against me, swelling up and aching in places I didn't even know could ache. Daniel, can you grab me some crackers? I'd call out weakly, hoping to stave off another wave of nausea. But more often than not, Daniel was already out the door, his second job eating up all his time. The few times he was home, I could barely keep my eyes open, let alone maintain a conversation. You're always sleeping, he'd snap, his patience wearing thin. Don't you care about anything else anymore? His words stung, adding guilt to the cocktail of discomfort I was already dealing with. I'm trying, I'd whisper back, tears welling up in my eyes. You think I enjoy this? Our arguments became more frequent, each one leaving a bitter taste and widening the gap between us. The joy of expecting our first child was overshadowed by the strain it put on our relationship. Daniel's late nights and my physical woes had us living like strangers under the same roof. One night, as I lay on the couch, too tired and sore to move to the bed, Daniel came home later than usual. The sound of the door slamming jolted me awake, my heart racing. Another long night? I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. What do you think? He retorted, his voice sharp with exhaustion. Someone's gotta pay for all this, he added, gesturing vaguely around our small apartment. I bit my lip, holding back the tears. I miss you, Daniel. We hardly talk anymore. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was stressed. Erica, I'm doing the best I can here. I don't know what you want from me. I want us back, I said softly, the loneliness in my voice echoing in the silence that followed. With Daniel working all hours and me trying to prep for our baby girl's arrival, things were tense. His folks, though, were a godsend. Living just a short drive away, they'd pop over often, helping out however they could. His mom, Linda, was particularly amazing, taking the lead on throwing a baby shower that was nothing short of spectacular. Linda turned our little apartment into a pink wonderland, filled with flowers, treats, and laughter. She even crafted this elaborate diaper cake that was both bizarre and beautiful. The wall behind the dining table was adorned with Sophia, our chosen name, in big, glittery letters. It was perfect, except for one glaring absence, Daniel. I'd asked him, no, pleaded with him to make it back in time. It's important to me, Daniel. Please, try to leave work early for once, I had said over the phone that morning, hope threading through my voice. Yeah, I'll see what I can do," he'd muttered, the sound of his keyboard clacking in the background. I should have known then not to get my hopes up. The party was a hit, with Linda's games and jokes keeping everyone entertained. Yet, my eyes kept darting to the door, wishing for it to open and Daniel to walk through. But he didn't. Not until long after the last guest had left, long after the laughter had died down. He stormed in at 11 p.m., the joy of the day evaporating the second I saw his face, contorted in anger. "What the hell happened here?" he barked, staring at the mess of decorations and leftover food. I was on the sofa, feet swollen, emotions frayed. "It was the baby shower, Daniel. Your mom and we organized it together. And you couldn't clean up? What's with that stupid name on the wall? Is that supposed to stay there?" His words were like daggers, each one slicing through the happiness I had felt just hours before. Tears spilled over, my voice a whisper among sobs. "It's our daughter's name, Daniel. Your mother put it up. I thought you'd be here." He scoffed, his anger unyielding. "I was working, Erica. Something you'd know nothing about anymore." With that, he stormed off to the bedroom, leaving me alone, drowning in a sea of pink and tears. The next morning was as if the night before had never happened. Daniel left for work without a word, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat there, in the aftermath of what was supposed to be a celebration, feeling more alone than ever. Linda came by later, her face falling as she took in the scene and my red-rimmed eyes. "He didn't make it, did he?" It wasn't a question. It was an acknowledgement of a painful truth. I shook my head, unable to find the words. She sighed, her disappointment in her son palpable. "I'll talk to him, Erica. This isn't right." But I knew deep down that no amount of talking would fix what was broken. Daniel had drifted so far from us, from me, that I wasn't sure he could find his way back. The day our daughter, Sophia, came into the world, it was just me and the buzz of my phone. I texted Daniel right after she was born, a simple message bursting with the biggest news. "You're a dad. Sophia's here." But all I got back was silence, even though I saw he'd read the message. It was like shouting into a void, expecting an echo that never comes. Leaving the hospital, my in-laws were the ones by my side, not Daniel. They were angels, honestly, helping with everything from the car seat to setting up a little nest for Sophia back at home. "You just focus on being a mom, Erica. We've got the rest," Linda, my mother-in-law, assured me with a warm smile that made things a little less heavy. When Daniel finally did show up, days later, his awkwardness around Sophia was like a wall between us. "I don't think I should hold her. I might do it wrong, hurt her or something," he muttered, staring at his own daughter like she was a stranger. I tried to keep the peace, keep things light. "It's not rocket science, Daniel. You won't break her. Here, just support her head," I said, gently offering our daughter to him. But he just backed away, shaking his head. "Nah, better not. I'm all thumbs, remember?" His attempt at a joke fell flat, leaving a sour taste. It was clear it wasn't just clumsiness holding him back, he didn't want to hold her, be near her. Things didn't get better. Nights were the hardest. Sophia, like any newborn, kept us up at all hours. But instead of pulling together, Daniel pulled away. One night, after a particularly rough round of crying, he announced, "I can't do this. I need sleep for work. I'll be in the spare room." "Just like that, then? You're bailing on us?" I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice, holding Sophia close, feeling more alone than ever. "It's not like that, Erica. I need to function, alright?" And with that, he left our room, the gap between us growing wider with every step he took away. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's visits to our bedroom became less and less frequent, until they stopped altogether. Our conversations were brief, functional, avoiding the elephant in the room, his absence, his detachment, and the growing distance between us not just as parents, but as a couple. One evening, I tried again, hoping to bridge the gap, for Sophia's sake. She's changing every day, Daniel. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I asked, hoping for something, anything, that showed he cared. He looked tired, worn down, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes when he glanced at Sophia. Of course, it does, Erica. I'm just not cut out for the baby stage, I guess. It's not a stage, Daniel. It's our life now, I replied, feeling the weight of our new reality pressing down on us both. Life with a newborn was no joke. Sophia was an angel by day, but turned into a party animal by night, crying and fussing till the sun came up. I was running on empty, looking more like a walking ghost than a new mom. Self-care was a distant memory, and all I dreamt about was sleep. One evening, as the clock ticked past our usual dinner time, I realized I hadn't even thought about cooking. Daniel came home, tired and hungry, to find the kitchen empty and me, half asleep with Sophia in my arms. "What's this? Where's dinner?" he barked, his voice echoing off the walls, filled with frustration. I blinked back tears, exhaustion making it hard to form a coherent response. I didn't get to it. Sophia was up all night, and what? You're home all day, Erica. How hard can it be to throw something together? His outburst cut deep, each word a reminder of how far we'd drifted from each other. This became our new normal, Daniel complaining about the lack of cooked meals, the untidy house, and how I was always too tired. His words stung, leaving me feeling inadequate and alone. One day, after a particularly harsh criticism, I reached out to Linda, spilling everything that had been happening. "Daniel just doesn't understand. I'm trying, but it's never enough," I confessed over the phone, the dam of my emotions breaking. "Oh, honey," Linda's voice was a mix of anger and sympathy. "He has no right to speak to you like that. You're doing your best. I'll have a word with him. And don't you worry, I'll help you out with the dinners." True to her word, Linda started dropping off meals for us, making sure Daniel didn't catch on. It was our little secret, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Linda. I don't know what I'd do without you," I said one evening as she handed me a casserole, her presence a comforting reminder that I wasn't in this alone. "Don't mention it, dear. Your family. And it's high time Daniel remembered that too," Linda replied, her tone firm, promising change. Her help was a band-aid on a bullet wound, though. Daniel's temper flared over trivial things, his patience thinning more each day. The meals may have been sorted, but the underlying issues, the lack of understanding and support, remained. One night, as Daniel complained about the laundry not being done, I couldn't hold back any longer. "I'm not Superwoman, Daniel. I'm doing the best I can. Why can't you see that?" I yelled back, my voice shaky with pent-up frustration and fatigue. He stared at me, his expression a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Well, maybe if you managed your time better." "Managed my time better?" I interrupted, incredulous. "I'm trying to keep our daughter happy and healthy, on no sleep, with no help from you. What more do you want from me?" Our argument spiraled from there, a harsh exchange of words and accusations. It was clear that something had to give. Linda's intervention was a temporary fix, but Daniel and I were on the brink, our marriage strained to breaking point by resentment and misunderstanding. That evening, everything came to a head in a way I never expected. Daniel stormed in, his face thunderous, while I was setting the table with the food Linda had brought over. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Without even tasting the food, Daniel swept the plates off the table, shattering them against the floor. "I can't eat this crap. It's tasteless," he yelled, his anger palpable. I stood there, stunned into silence, my heart pounding in my chest. Before I could muster a response, Linda emerged from Sophia's room, having heard the commotion. "What on earth is going on here? Why did you dump my food on the floor?" she demanded, her eyes darting between the mess on the floor and her son's furious face. Daniel, caught off guard by his mother's sudden appearance, stammered, "I thought Erica made this. It's awful." Linda's face turned red, not with embarrassment, but with anger. You thought Erica made this? And that gives you the right to act like a child, throwing food around? She stepped closer to him, her voice rising. Do you have any idea how hard she's working, caring for your daughter all day and night? When was the last time you acknowledged that, huh? Daniel looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him up. Mom, No, Daniel. Linda cut him off sharply. You need to hear this. Erica's doing the best she can under tough circumstances. And instead of supporting her, you criticize and belittle her efforts. Shame on you. Daniel's eyes lowered, the fight going out of him. He mumbled an apology to his mother, but Linda was quick to correct him. You owe your apology to Erica, not me. And you know what? You need to spend a day in her shoes. Maybe then you'll understand. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with unspoken truths and realizations. Daniel nodded slowly, the reality of his actions beginning to sink in. I'm sorry, Erica. I didn't realize. Linda's plan was simple, yet daunting. Daniel would take over all my duties for a day, caring for Sophia without any help unless it was absolutely necessary. I was skeptical, but desperate for a breakthrough. After Linda's departure, the air was still thick with tension, but there was a newfound resolve between us. So, we're doing this, huh? I asked, half doubting, half hopeful. You're going to take a crack at my day today? Daniel nodded, the weight of his recent realizations evident in his posture. Yeah, I need to see for myself. How hard can it be, right? There was a hint of his old, cocky humor, but it was laced with apprehension. Okay, but you're on your own, remember? I'm just a call away, but only if you really need it. I reminded him, laying out Sophia's schedule, her feeds, her naps, everything on paper. Spending the day with Linda was a breath of fresh air, literally and figuratively. We shopped, laughed, and for a few hours, I was just me again, not just a mom or a tired wife. Coming home, I was greeted by the sight of Daniel, who looked like he'd been through a war zone. His hair was a mess, there were stains on his shirt, and the living room looked like a toy bomb had exploded. Erica, he breathed out, relief and something else, maybe respect. Coloring his tone. He wrapped me in an exhausted embrace. I'm sorry. For everything. This was the hardest day of my life. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the past weeks melting away. Oh, really? And here I thought it was just me not managing my time well. I teased, but gently, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. He kissed my hands, an act so tender it made my heart swell. Please, don't leave me alone with her for that long again. I had no idea, everything you do. It's unbelievable. After that day, things started to shift between us. It was like we finally found our rhythm again, understanding and appreciating each other in ways we'd forgotten. He got it now, how relentless and exhausting it was to care for Sophia, and he stepped up, big time. Hey, why don't you take the afternoon off? He'd suggest on a Saturday, seeing the fatigue in my eyes. Go hit the shops or get your nails done. I've got Sophia. Linda and we became thick as thieves. She wasn't just my mother-in-law anymore, she was my confidant, my support system. You've done wonders for him, you know. For both of them, she'd tell me, and I could see the pride in her eyes. One evening, as we sat down after putting Sophia to bed, Daniel turned to me, his hand finding mine across the couch. I was thinking, maybe it's time for you to focus on what you want again. You've been talking about going back to work, right? I nodded, surprised. Yeah, but I didn't want to just spring it on you. We've just gotten back on track. He squeezed my hand, his smile reassuring. We're a team, remember? I've seen how much you've sacrificed, how hard you've worked to keep our little world spinning. It's my turn to support you now. The relief and love I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I've missed my work, but I was scared it would be too much for us to handle. We'll make it work. Just like we always do. Together. he said, the determination in his voice matching the resolve in my heart. And so, I started looking into going back to work, energized by the prospect of reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd put aside. Daniel and we found our balance, sharing the load of parenting and household duties, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions. Walking through the doors of the veterinary hospital that day, I was all set for another long shift. The place was a second home to me, a haven where my modest upbringing didn't matter, and my love for animals could shine. Little did I know, my world was about to tilt on its axis. He was there, leaning against the front desk, chatting with Janet, one of our seasoned nurses. His laughter filled the room, easy and genuine, catching my attention immediately. I couldn't help but pause, struck by the warmth in his eyes when he smiled. "Can I help you?" I asked, approaching them with a mix of curiosity and professional courtesy. "Oh, I was just thanking Janet here for taking care of Whiskers last week." "You guys do amazing work," he replied, his gaze meeting mine. There was an instant spark, an unspoken connection that I felt deep in my bones. "I'm Jerian," he added, extending his hand, which I shook, feeling a jolt of electricity at the contact. "I'm Carol," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm glad Whiskers is doing better. It's our job to make sure they get the care they need." Jerian nodded, his smile widening. "I can see the passion you all have for your work. It's inspiring. Actually, I'm here to volunteer. I want to help out in any way I can." His admission took me by surprise. Volunteers were common, but there was something about Jerian, a sincerity that couldn't be faked. His simple, unassuming manner was refreshing, especially when he shared that he came from a well-to-do family. It was a detail he mentioned offhandedly, as if it were the least interesting thing about him. We spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side, Jerian throwing himself into the tasks with an eagerness that was both endearing and slightly amusing. From feeding the animals to cleaning their enclosures, he didn't shy away from any job, no matter how dirty. After that first meeting at the veterinary hospital, things between Jerian and me started moving at a pace neither of us expected, but both secretly hoped for. Our initial connection over the animals quickly blossomed into something more, something real and tangible. Our first date was a simple affair. Jerian took me to a small, cozy cafe tucked away on a street I'd passed 1,000 times but never noticed. The place was a reflection of us, unpretentious and genuine. Over cups of coffee that turned cold because we were too engrossed in conversation, we discovered the myriad ways our lives intersected, from our mutual love for old movies to our uncanny ability to quote lines from obscure books. "We're quite the pair, aren't we?" Jerian joked, his eyes sparkling with amusement as he recited a line from one of my favorite novels, one I'd mentioned in passing. I laughed, surprised and delighted by his memory and effort. "Yeah, a regular Bonnie and Clyde," I quipped back, not missing a beat. But instead of crime, we were united by our shared passions and the laughter that came so easily between us. Date after date, our connection deepened. We found joy in the simple things, a walk in the park, a visit to a local animal shelter, or just sitting together in silence, comfortable in each other's presence. It was during these moments that I saw the true Jerian, the man behind the wealth and the expectations that came with it. He was kind, compassionate, and genuinely interested in making a difference, qualities that resonated with my own values and aspirations. As those early dates turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I couldn't help but feel grateful for that chance encounter at the veterinary hospital. Meeting Jerian's parents was a milestone I approached with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Despite Jerian's reassurances, the butterflies in my stomach were more like a swarm of bees as we drove up to his family's estate. It was grand, far removed from the humble surroundings I was accustomed to, and it served as a stark reminder of our differing worlds. Jerian squeezed my hand as we walked up to the door, his smile comforting yet unable to completely ease my nerves. "They're going to love you," he whispered, just as the door swung open to reveal his parents. His father, Mr. Eldridge, was the first to greet us, his demeanor warm and welcoming. "Jerian, my boy. And you must be Carol. We've heard so much about you, he said, extending a hand that enveloped mine in a firm, friendly shake. Thank you for having me, Mr. Eldridge. It's a pleasure to meet you, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Then came Martha, Mrs. Eldridge, the woman who would soon become my infamous mother-in-law. Her appearance was impeccable, but her eyes scrutinized me in a way that made me feel like I was back in high school, desperately trying to fit in with the cool crowd. So, Carol, Jerian tells us you work at a veterinary clinic. That must be interesting, she began, her tone implying that interesting was a euphemism for less than impressive. Yes, Mrs. Eldridge. It's very fulfilling work. I've always loved animals, I answered, trying to keep my voice even despite the clear judgment in hers. And your family? Jerian mentioned they're from the countryside. Do you visit often? I imagine it's quite different from the city life, she continued, each question laced with an underlying critique of my background. My parents are wonderful people. We're very close, and yes, it's a different pace of life, but it's where I call home, I said, my pride in my roots firm, despite her not-so-subtle digs. Dinner was an exercise in maintaining composure. Mrs. Eldridge's comments ranged from backhanded compliments about my quaint upbringing to outright interrogations about whether I had ever traveled abroad or dined in fine restaurants. Each question felt like a test I hadn't studied for, her words designed to highlight our differences rather than find common ground. Jerian, bless him, tried to steer the conversation to safer waters, interjecting with stories of our time together that had everyone laughing, everyone except his mother, who seemed determined to find fault in anything related to me. It was when she asked, Carol, dear, have you decided on a wedding dress yet? Or are you planning to make do with something homemade? That I realized this wasn't just about getting to know me. It was about her asserting a perceived superiority, her way of reminding me that I didn't belong. I smiled, a genuine one born of the confidence Jerian's love gave me. Mrs. Eldridge, I believe a wedding dress should reflect the love and commitment of the couple, not the price tag. Jerian and I are focused on what comes after the wedding, building a life together based on respect, love, and understanding. The silence that followed was palpable. Even Mrs. Eldridge seemed momentarily at a loss, her fork paused mid-air. Mr. Eldridge, however, nodded in approval, a twinkle in his eye as he looked at me. Well said, Carol. Well said indeed. The ride home was quiet, but Jerian broke the silence with an apology that was heartfelt yet unnecessary. I'm sorry about my mom. She can be difficult. I squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of his support. It's okay, Jerian. Your love is all the validation I need. Together, we'll get through anything. As the wedding preparations unfolded, Martha made it her mission to underline our differences at every turn. Her intrusion wasn't just unwelcome, it was downright aggressive. She had a comment for everything, from the color scheme of the hall to the floral arrangements, and even the style of our invitation cards. One evening, as Jerian and I were finalizing the guest list, Mrs. Eldridge dropped by unannounced, her eyes scanning our choices with evident disapproval. You're not seriously considering this shade of green for the decor, are you? It's so provincial, she remarked, her nose wrinkled as if she'd smelled something foul. I tried to keep my cool, but her next comment about our guest list set me off. And these friends of yours, they're hardly the sort one expects at a wedding of our stature. It might be best to leave them off the list, don't you think? I felt a flash of anger, but managed to keep my voice steady. Mrs. Eldridge, Jerian, and I have decided on the guest list together. Everyone we care about will be there, regardless of their status. Her lips pursed into a thin line, clearly not used to being contradicted. The tension only escalated when she turned her attention to my wedding dress, which I had chosen for its simplicity and elegance. That dress, she sniffed. It's charming if you're attending a country fair, perhaps. But for a wedding in our family? It's hardly appropriate. I bit back a retort, my hands clenched at my sides. Jerian, sensing the brewing storm, tried to intervene, but his mother was on a roll. And where are you planning to honeymoon? A quaint little barn in the countryside? She asked, her voice dripping with malice. That was the last straw. Our honeymoon plans are our business, I shot back, the hurt clear in my voice. Just like every other decision about this wedding. It's about what makes us happy, not about living up to some outdated standards. Mrs. Eldridge's eyes narrowed, but before she could retort, Jerian stepped in. Mom, that's enough. This is our wedding, Carol's and mine. We're making the decisions that are right for us. If you can't support that, maybe you should reconsider your involvement in the planning. The room went silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Mrs. Eldridge huffed, muttered something under her breath about speaking later, and stormed out. After she left, the air felt lighter, as if her departure had lifted a weight from the room. Jerian wrapped his arms around me, his apology whispered in my ear. I'm sorry, Carol. I don't know what's gotten into her. It's not your fault, I sighed, leaning into his embrace. But I'm glad you said something. This is our wedding, our day. It should be about us, not about pleasing everyone else. The wedding day, supposed to be the happiest of my life, started off just like I'd always dreamed. The church ceremony was beautiful, filled with love and promise. I stood there, in my simple yet elegant dress, feeling truly beautiful and cherished, hand in hand with Jerian, my soon-to-be husband. But amidst the joy, a nagging feeling tugged at me. Glancing over, I caught my mother-in-law's expectant look, her smirk barely hidden. It was clear she was plotting something, but I pushed the thought aside, hoping for the best. The ceremony concluded without a hitch, and as we headed to the reception, I tried to hold on to the happiness of the moment. However, as soon as we arrived, I saw her again, my mother-in-law, moving towards the microphone with a purpose. My heart sank. With all eyes on her, she began, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about our newest family member. Her gaze locked with mine, and I felt a chill. Coming from such humble beginnings, it's truly remarkable how resourceful Carol has been. From the village to here, embracing our family with open arms, like a true freeloader, and, dare I say, a beggar at our doorstep. The room fell silent, the guests exchanging uncomfortable glances. Even those from Jerian's side, the so-called high society, looked taken aback by her harsh words. I stood frozen, shock giving way to humiliation, tears blurring my vision as I heard a few gasps and murmurs ripple through the crowd. Beside me, I could see my parents, their faces flushed with shame, hurt by the cruel words aimed at their daughter. Before I could process everything, Jerian was by my side, his voice filled with anger and apology. I'm so sorry, Carol. I had no idea she'd stoop this low, he whispered, his arm wrapping around me in support. But before we could react further, an unexpected ally emerged. Jerian's grandmother, a respected matriarch of the family, stood up, her presence commanding attention. Enough, she boomed, her voice cutting through the tension. I cannot believe what I'm hearing. This woman, who speaks so ill of simplicity and humility, seems to forget her own roots. Did you all know? She herself was once nothing more than a servant in our household. And now, look how she turns her nose up at those very beginnings. The room erupted in whispers, the tables turned. My mother-in-law's face went from smug satisfaction to utter horror, her cheeks burning red as the grandmother continued to dismantle her facade of superiority. This girl, Carol, has shown more grace and dignity than you ever have, the grandmother said, her gaze softening as she looked at me. She is welcome in our family, not for her background, but for her heart. The reception that followed was a blur. My mother-in-law, now the subject of whispered conversations, left early, her exit barely noticed in the renewed celebration. Jerian was by my side throughout, his apologies unnecessary as his love and support spoke volumes. The room was still buzzing from the grandmother's unexpected defense of me. Guests whispered among themselves, casting sidelong glances at the now absent mother-in-law. Jerian squeezed my hand under the table, a silent promise of solidarity. Can you believe what just happened? Jerian asked, his voice a mix of astonishment and relief. I shook my head, still processing the whirlwind of emotions. No, Jerian, your grandmother, she was incredible. I didn't think anyone would stand up to your mother like that, let alone in such a public way. Jerian smiled, a look of pride crossing his face. Grandma has always been the matriarch of our family. She doesn't tolerate injustice or cruelty. I guess I forgot how formidable she can be. We were interrupted by the approach of the very woman of the hour, Jerian's grandmother. Her presence commanded respect, yet there was a warmth in her eyes as she looked at us. Carol, dear, I hope you're feeling better after that unpleasantness, she said, her voice firm but kind. Thank you, Mrs. Eldridge. Your words meant the world to me. I was feeling pretty low, but you've turned the whole evening around, I replied, gratitude swelling in my heart. She waved a hand dismissively. Nonsense, my dear. It was long overdue. That woman needed to be reminded of her place and to learn respect. You are a part of this family now, and we protect our own. Jerian's father joined us, a sheepish look on his face. Carol, I'm sorry for my wife's behavior. I hope you can forgive us for any hurt she's caused. I nodded, understanding the difficult position he was in. Thank you, Mr. Eldridge. Today has been a whirlwind, but your family's support has made all the difference. As the evening continued, the atmosphere in the room lightened. Guests came up to us, offering their congratulations and, in some cases, apologies for the earlier drama. It was clear that the tide had turned, not just in terms of the evening's events, but in how I was viewed by Jerian's family and their social circle. Later, as Jerian and I took to the dance floor, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory, not over his mother, but over the situation. We had faced adversity head-on and come out stronger on the other side. Jerian, I said, as we swayed to the music, today has been a lot. But I've never been more sure about us. Your family's support, especially your grandmother's, has shown me that we can handle anything together. The atmosphere at Jerian's family home was charged as we gathered for the meeting his grandmother had called. After the wedding's tumultuous events, I was anxious about facing everyone again, especially Jerian's mother. However, Jerian squeezed my hand reassuringly as we took our seats in the large living room, filled with generations of Eldridges and a palpable tension. Jerian's grandmother, the undeniable matriarch, stood at the head of the room, her presence commanding attention. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady and authoritative. We're here to address a matter that concerns the dignity and unity of our family. Jerian's mother sat rigid, her eyes darting around the room, perhaps seeking an ally or preparing for a counterattack. Jerian, ever the peacemaker, spoke up first. Grandma, I know things got out of hand at the wedding. I want to apologize on behalf of. His grandmother raised a hand, silencing him. Jerian, my boy, this isn't about placing blame on anyone. It's about setting things right. She then turned her gaze to me. Carol, you've shown nothing but grace and patience in the face of less than welcoming behavior. For that, you have my respect. I nodded, touched by her words. Thank you, Mrs. Eldridge. I just want what's best for Jerian and to be a part of this family. The room was silent, all eyes on us, when suddenly Jerian's mother stood, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I've listened enough. This girl, she gestured wildly towards me, has turned everyone against me. And you, she pointed accusingly at her mother-in-law, you humiliate me in front of the whole family. Jerian's grandmother remained unfazed. I stated the truth. You forgot where you came from, and you tried to belittle Carol for her origins. That's not the Eldridge way. Jerian's father finally spoke, his voice firm. Enough, Martha. Your behavior has been unacceptable. It's time you reflect on your actions and their impact on our family's reputation. The room went quiet again as the weight of his words settled in. Jerian's mother sank back into her chair, her defiance fading. The grandmother continued. we are a family. And families support and lift each other up, not tear each other down. Carol, you are welcome here, always. As the family meeting began to wind down, with the air still heavy from the discussions and revelations, Jerian's grandmother, the respected matriarch, had one more issue to address. She cleared her throat, signaling that she wasn't quite finished, drawing the room's attention once again. Now, there's another matter I need to bring to light, she started, her tone serious, hinting at the gravity of what was to come. From her purse, she pulled out a long list, the paper rustling loudly in the quiet room. It's come to my attention that Martha's spending has been, to put it mildly, extravagant and irresponsible over the past month. The room fell silent, every pair of eyes fixed on the list that seemed to unravel like a scroll. Jerian's mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her earlier defiance melting into panic. These expenses, the grandmother continued, are not only frivolous, but are bleeding our family resources dry. This cannot go on. Martha, now pale, looked around, perhaps hoping for an ally, but finding none, she turned to her husband, desperation in her voice. You can't let her do this to me. You know we need the money for. Her husband, a man who had been quiet for most of the meeting, spoke up, his voice firm and devoid of any warmth he might have previously held for her. I agree with my mother. It's time you learned the value of hard work, Martha. I won't support your lavish lifestyle anymore. Martha's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. The realization that she was truly alone in this, that her actions had consequences, seemed to finally dawn on her. And if your behavior continues along this path, he added, the threat clear in his tone, I will have no choice but to seek a divorce. Our family's reputation and well-being come first. The finality in his statement left no room for argument. Martha was visibly shaken, her composure completely shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she looked around the room, perhaps finally understanding the severity of her actions and their impact on those she claimed to love. After our honeymoon, a blissful escape where the world seemed to revolve around just the two of us, Jerian and I returned to a reality that had shifted in our absence. The news that greeted us was unexpected. Jerian's father had divorced Mrs. Eldridge. Despite his love for his mother, Jerian stood by his father's decision. Mrs. Eldridge, now living in a modest apartment and grappling with the new necessity of finding employment, seemed a world away from the woman who had looked down on me with such disdain. It was a drastic change in fortune that I wouldn't wish on anyone, despite our past. One afternoon, not long after our return, the phone rang. Expecting it to be Jerian, who had popped out for a short errand, I answered, only to find myself on the line with Mrs. Eldridge. The conversation began awkwardly, her voice cold and tinged with the contempt that had characterized our interactions. I suppose you're satisfied, seeing me in this state, she started, her words sharp. I held the phone a little tighter, struggling to keep my voice even. It's not about satisfaction. This was never what I wanted. As the call progressed, there was a noticeable shift in her tone. The arrogance and disdain gradually gave way to desperation. Listen, I need you to talk to them. To your father-in-law, to the grandmother. Maybe they'll listen to you. Tell them I'm sorry. That I'll change. Her plea took me by surprise. The woman who had once held herself so high was now begging for intercession. It was a moment that revealed the fragility beneath her previously unassailable facade. I took a deep breath before responding, my decision clear. I'm sorry, but that's not my place. This is something you need to address directly with them. They need to hear this from you, not me. Ending the call, I sat for a moment, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. When Jerian returned, I relayed the exchange, uncertain how he would react. He listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. After a pause, he spoke, his voice firm. You did the right thing. As much as I love my mom, she needs to understand the consequences of her actions. It's the only way she might truly change. His support was a balm, reaffirming the solidarity between us. This journey, with all its twists and turns, had brought us closer, cementing our bond through the challenges we faced together. As we moved forward, building our life together, the lessons of the past remained with us. A reminder of the resilience of love, the importance of forgiveness, and the strength found in standing united, even in the face of difficult family dynamics. At 58, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm for me. My days were filled with the simple pleasures of home life and long, leisurely walks with my husband, Tom, who had recently retired. Our son, Danny, had grown into a man of 30, married to Clara, a woman with whom my relationship could best be described as strained. Despite the friction, I held out hope that time would mend whatever rift lay between us. It was a typical Thursday afternoon when the phone rang, slicing through the quiet hum of our home. Tom was out in the yard, probably fussing over his tomato plants, and I was knee-deep in a book, enjoying the kind of peace you only get when you've retired to the outskirts of the city. Our life was simple, the way we liked it. "Hello?" I answered, expecting it to be Tom, maybe needing a hand with something outside. "Hey, Mom, it's Danny." His voice, always a bit hurried, sounded even more so today. "Danny, what's up? Is everything okay?" I sat up, my book forgotten. Calls in the middle of the day were rare. Danny's job kept him busy, and Clara, his wife, even busier with her own things. Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, I was wondering. Clara and I are getting our place renovated, and it's turning into a bigger mess than we thought. Can we crash with you and Dad for a bit? There was a hopeful lilt in his voice, but it was rushed, almost as if he was expecting a no. I paused, considering. Our small house wasn't exactly guest-ready, especially not for an indefinite stay. But this was Danny, our son, and his need echoed in me, stirring that maternal instinct that never quite fades, no matter how old they get. Well, I don't see why not. Let me just chat with your dad, but I'm sure it'll be fine. How long are we talking about here? Thanks, Mom. You're a lifesaver. Just a couple of weeks, tops. I owe you one. The relief in his voice was palpable. All right, just remember, it's cozy here. You two will need to help out around the house, okay? Of course, Mom. Thanks again. We'll bring over our stuff this weekend. Hanging up, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. It had been a while since we'd had the house full. Danny moving out had left a quiet that Jack and I had grown accustomed to, filling it with walks, gardening, and the kind of togetherness that comes with having weathered many of life's storms side by side. Tom, I called out, stepping onto the porch. Danny and Clara are going to stay with us for a bit. Tom looked up from his tomatoes, wiping his brow. Oh? What's the occasion? Their apartment's a war zone, renovations gone wild. They need a place to crash. He chuckled, a deep, warm sound. Well, it'll be nice to have some extra hands around. When are they coming? This weekend. Better get the spare room ready then. And maybe stock up on coffee, you know how Danny is in the mornings. I laughed, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. I'll add it to the list. The weekend came faster than expected. Danny and Clara arrived with their belongings, a whirlwind of bags and boxes that seemed to spill into every corner of our once-ordered home. Clara, always a bit on the edge, seemed even more so, her eyes darting around as if assessing whether our humble abode was up to her standards. Thanks for letting us stay. We'll try not to be in the way, Danny said, dropping a heavy suitcase with a thud. It's no trouble, dear. You know you're always welcome here, I replied, shooting a glance at Clara, who offered a tight smile in return. Life at our house had taken a turn towards the chaotic since Danny and Clara moved in. I was doing my best, keeping the place tidy and cooking meals that could feed an army, or at least that's how it felt with 2 extra mouths to feed. Clara, on the other hand, seemed to think she was on some extended vacation, contributing nothing to the household chores. Despite only working half-days, her afternoons were spent either glued to her phone or watching TV. One day, after tripping over a pair of Clara's shoes left in the middle of the living room for what felt like the 100th time, I decided enough was enough. I found her lounging on the couch, absorbed in her phone as usual. "Clara, do you think you could start picking up after yourself? Maybe even help out around the house a bit?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even, though inside I was boiling. She looked up at me, her expression one of disbelief, as if I'd asked her to climb Everest in flip-flops. "I'm a guest here, Linda. I shouldn't have to do chores in my husband's parents' house. That's just not how it works." I stared at her, dumbfounded by her audacity. "Well, in this house, we all contribute. It's not a hotel." The conversation went nowhere. Clara simply shrugged and went back to her phone, leaving me fuming. That night, I made a decision. I cooked dinner just for Tom and me, a silent protest against Clara's laziness. When Danny came home and saw only 2 places set at the table, his confusion quickly turned to indignation. "What's this about, Mom? Why aren't there plates for me and Clara?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the confrontation. "Your wife seems to think she's staying at a 5-star hotel where the service is included. This is a family home, Danny. We all do our part." Danny's face turned red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. "That's not fair, Mom. We're guests." I shook my head, resolute. "No, son. You're family, and in this family, we help each other out. You can either pitch in or find a hotel." The words hung heavy in the air. Danny stormed off to talk to Clara, and I could hear the muffled sounds of their discussion. Eventually, they both appeared in the kitchen, Clara with a look that could curdle milk. "Fine," Danny said, his voice tight. "We'll help out around the house." Clara didn't say a word, just nodded stiffly, her arms crossed over her chest as if she'd been asked to donate a kidney rather than wash a few dishes. After weeks of endless cleaning, cooking, and refereeing arguments between Danny and Clara, I hit my breaking point. "Tom," I said one evening, "we need a break. How about we book that hotel by the ocean you've always talked about?" Tom, looking as worn out as I felt, didn't hesitate. "Let's do it. We deserve some peace." Breaking the news to Danny and Clara didn't go as smoothly as booking the hotel had. "You're going on a vacation?" Danny asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "Why? You're always at home." I bristled at his response, the insinuation that my days were leisurely enough as it was. "Even people who stay at home need a break, Danny. Especially with the extra workload we've had." Danny's next words floored me. "Instead of wasting money on a holiday, you could help us out more. We need new furniture for the apartment." I stared at him, speechless. This was the boy I'd raised, who I'd poured my heart and soul into. "I can't believe you're saying this. Your father and I are going, and that's final." Our trip was a balm for our weary souls. The ocean's roar, the sunsets, long walks on the beach, all of it reminded Tom and me of the world beyond our doorstep, beyond the daily grind. Returning home, however, was like stepping into a disaster zone. Pizza boxes towered like skyscrapers on the kitchen counter, empty bottles clinked together on the floor, and a general layer of dust and disarray covered everything. It looked like a tornado had swept through, deciding to make our living room its final resting place. "Danny, Clara," I called out, my voice echoing through the chaos. They emerged, looking sheepish and a bit caught off guard by our early return. "Why didn't you clean up? You knew we were coming back today," I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. Clara shrugged, her indifference like a slap in the face. "No one pays me to clean up around here." Tom and I exchanged glances, both of us teetering on the edge of losing our cool. "This is not a hotel, and you're not guests. You're family, and this is your home as much as it is ours," Tom said, his voice firm yet controlled. Danny seemed to shrink a bit, perhaps realizing the extent of their neglect. "Sorry, Mom, Dad. We'll clean it up now." But the damage was done, the disregard for our home too stark to ignore. As they scrambled to tidy up, Tom and I retreated to our room, the joy from our trip fading fast. The realization that our return to peace was temporary weighed heavily on us. Our home, our sanctuary, had been treated like a mere crash pad, and the respect we expected from our own family felt miles away. As December rolled around, the chill wasn't just in the air, it had settled right into our home, thick and palpable. Christmas, a time I'd always cherished for its warmth and togetherness, felt under threat this year. Still, I was determined to keep traditions alive, to find some joy in the season, despite the tensions. "Tom," I said, pulling out boxes of decorations from the attic, "let's make the house look festive. Maybe it'll lighten the mood around here." Tom nodded, a small smile breaking through his usual reserved demeanor. "That sounds like a great idea, love. Let's deck the halls, then." The process of decorating became a bittersweet activity. Each ornament, each strand of lights, was a memory, a reminder of Christmases past when Danny was just a boy, his eyes wide with wonder at the sight of the tree all lit up. This year, however, Danny and Clara seemed more distant than ever. When I asked if they wanted to join in, Danny shrugged. "We're actually planning to go to the mountains for Christmas, just Clara and me." The news hit me harder than expected. "Oh, I see. Well, that sounds like a lovely trip," I managed to say, my voice steady, despite the pang in my heart. Clara, who'd been silent, finally spoke up. "Yeah, we thought it'd be nice to have a change of scenery. Besides, it's not like we're missing much here, right?" Her words, sharp and dismissive, stung. I bit my tongue, focusing on the garland I was untangling rather than the growing gap between us. Determined to inject some warmth into our strained relations, I thought of a simple yet hopeful gesture. "Tom, what if we give everyone lottery tickets for Christmas? It's fun, and who knows, it might even bring us some luck." Tom, ever supportive, just nodded. "Sure, love. It's worth a try. Might lighten the mood around here." When Christmas Eve came around, I carefully wrapped the tickets in festive paper, hoping to see a spark of excitement or at least a smile from Danny and Clara. The moment of truth arrived as we sat around the living room, the air filled with the mixed scents of pine and the cinnamon from the cookies I'd baked. "Here you go, everyone. A little something for fun," I said, handing out the envelopes with a hopeful smile. Danny took his with a puzzled look, but it was Clara's reaction that left me stunned. She barely glanced at the envelope before tossing it aside with a scoff. "Lottery tickets? Really? That's what you think of giving us?" My heart sank, but I tried to keep my tone light. "It's just for a bit of fun, Clara. Everyone enjoys the thrill of possibly winning something, right?" Danny, catching on to Clara's disdain, shrugged and set his envelope on the coffee table. "Thanks, but it's not really our thing." I stood there, the festive cheer draining out of me, replaced by a heavy disappointment. Without another word, I picked up the discarded tickets. "All right then, no harm done. Tom and I will keep them. Merry Christmas, anyway." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversations, the warmth of the season lost in the chill of their indifference. Tom squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of solidarity that spoke volumes. As they left for their trip, the house felt emptier than ever, but Tom and I decided to make the best of it. We settled in for a quiet Christmas, just the two of us, reminiscing about the past and pondering the future. "It's just us this year, Tom. Feels strange, doesn't it?" I mused, sipping my hot cocoa. Tom took my hand, his eyes soft. "It does, love. But we've got each other, and that's more than enough." Our simple celebration was a testament to our resilience, a reminder that while we couldn't control everything, we could still find happiness in the little moments, in the shared smiles and quiet nights. After the calm and reflective holiday Tom and I shared, pondering over Danny's behavior, our lives took a turn for the surreal. Discovering that the lottery tickets, dismissed and discarded by Danny and Clara, were winners felt like a bolt from the blue. We were suddenly over $500,000 richer, a windfall that left us dizzy with possibilities. My dreams of travel and Tom's longing for a new home suddenly seemed within reach. The news, however, didn't stay just between us for long. When Danny and Clara caught wind of our good fortune, the atmosphere in the house shifted palpably. "Danny, Clara, we've got some news," I began, the winning tickets in hand. "Those tickets you didn't want? They won. Big time." Danny's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and something else, greed, maybe? "So, when do we get our part?" he asked, his tone eager, almost desperate. "You said those tickets were our Christmas gifts, right?" I couldn't help but feel a sting at his words, a reminder of their earlier disdain. "You tossed those gifts aside, remember? You made it clear they meant nothing to you." Clara, never one to hold back, jumped in with her own demands. "We need that money. I've been looking at cars, and—" "Stop right there," I interrupted, my patience fraying. "You can't reject a gift and then claim it when it suits you. And as for the money, it's ours. We're thinking of traveling, maybe even buying a new home. And it's time you two found your own place. Your apartment's renovation has been done for ages." The conversation spiraled from there, Clara's face turning a shade of red I'd only seen on tomatoes in mid-July. She stormed off, her exit marked by the slam of a bedroom door, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Danny, however, wasn't ready to drop it. "But the apartment isn't ready. We can't move out yet." Tom and I exchanged weary glances. This wasn't the first time we'd heard that excuse. "Listen, Danny, we've been more than accommodating, but it's been months. It's time you two figured things out on your own." The standoff lingered, an uncomfortable cloud over the house, until, finally, I caved. "Fine. 1 more month. But that's it. Use it to get your apartment sorted." Danny nodded, relief visible in his posture, but the tension didn't dissipate. It hung between us, a reminder of the growing divide, of expectations unmet and generosity taken for granted. The evening was settling in, a soft golden light filtering through the curtains, when I noticed Clara's laptop left carelessly on the living room table. I moved to tidy up, my hand accidentally brushing against the mousepad. The screen flickered to life, revealing tabs that sent a shiver down my spine, legal advice on declaring someone legally incompetent, understanding first-line heirs, and guides on claiming an inheritance. "Tom," I called out, my voice a mix of disbelief and concern. He came over, and I pointed at the screen. "Look at this." He squinted at the laptop, reading the open tabs, and his brow furrowed. "What in the world?" "We don't know for sure what this means," I said, feeling a knot of worry in my stomach. "But we can't just ignore it." Tom nodded, his usual calm demeanor taking on a hint of steel. "We won't. Let's make sure we're protected." The decision to visit our lawyer wasn't taken lightly. We explained the situation without naming Clara directly, seeking advice on how to safeguard our assets and ensure our will reflected our wishes. The lawyer recommended updating our will to protect our estate, advice we took to heart. We made the difficult decision to exclude Danny from our will, a move that pained me deeply but felt necessary under the circumstances. Additionally, I took steps to secure our bank accounts, adding extra layers of security and setting conditions for withdrawals and transfers. It was a precautionary measure, one I hoped we'd never need, but the peace of mind it provided was invaluable. Once these protections were in place, I called Danny. My heart was heavy as I spoke, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Danny, your father and I have decided to go on a long cruise. We need you and Clara to find your own place within a week." His response was a mix of surprise and frustration. "A week? That's not a lot of time, Mom." "I know, and under different circumstances, we'd offer more time. But this decision is final. It's time for all of us to move forward," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. After the call, Tom and I shared a long, silent look. The news of the upcoming cruise was a way to push Clara to take decisive action. On a crisp Saturday morning, with a plan heavy on our hearts, Tom and I decided to leave a recording device hidden in the living room. Our home, once a place of warmth and laughter, had become a stage for a plot that chilled us to the bone. With the device set, we went for a walk, hoping the fresh air would clear the storm of emotions brewing inside us. Upon our return, the aroma of dinner welcomed us, a surprise from Clara, who had never before taken the initiative to cook for us. This unexpected act of kindness left us bewildered, teetering on the edge of hope and suspicion. "Let's listen to the recording before dinner," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom nodded, his face etched with worry. In the privacy of our bedroom, we played the recording. The voices of our son and Clara filled the room, unveiling a plan so dark it felt like a punch to the gut. Clara, with her knowledge from working in a psychiatric center, detailed how they could use certain drugs to incapacitate us, with the end goal of declaring us legally incompetent and seizing control of our assets. Hearing Danny's hesitant agreement was a betrayal that cut deeper than Clara's scheming. Our own son, complicit in a plan that would rob us of our freedom and our life's work. The recording ended, and silence engulfed us, a silence heavy with the weight of shattered trust. Tom reached for my hand, his grip firm, a silent vow that we would face this together. "We can't confront them directly," I said, my mind racing. "We need to be smart, to protect ourselves and expose their plot without putting ourselves in danger." Tom agreed, his jaw set. "We'll play along for now, but we're taking steps to secure our safety and our assets. They won't know what hit them." The decision to act as if nothing had changed was one of the hardest I've ever made. To sit at the dinner table, sharing a meal Clara had prepared, knowing her intentions, required a strength I didn't know I had. We thanked her for the dinner, exchanging pleasantries while a storm raged within us. Our son, our flesh and blood, had been drawn into a scheme against us, and we were determined to find a way to reach him, to remind him of the values we had tried to instill in him. As we laid our plans, Tom and I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But together, we were resolved to navigate it with grace, to emerge not just unscathed but stronger. After the harrowing discovery and the tense days that followed, Tom and I decided to handle the situation with as much grace and caution as we could muster. We played along with Clara's plan, pretending that the effects of the supposed drugs had taken hold. The day she planned to administer the final dose, we had already set our plan into motion. That evening, as we sat down to what was supposed to be our last meal in our own home, the doorbell rang. Clara, confident in her victory, went to answer it, only to find the police on our doorstep. I had called them earlier, explaining our suspicions and the imminent danger we believed we were in. "We believe there's been an attempt to harm us," I told the officers, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Could you please analyze this tea?" Clara tried to intervene, her face a mask of panic as she reached for the kettle, but one of the officers was quicker, securing it for evidence. The investigation that followed was swift and damning. The evidence against Clara was overwhelming, leading to her conviction. While it pained me to see my family torn apart this way, the safety and well-being of Tom and I had to come first. We received a significant financial compensation, but no amount of money could repair the emotional and relational damage that had been inflicted. In the aftermath, Danny and Clara's marriage crumbled, and he moved away, starting anew in another city. Though our hearts ached for what could have been, Tom and I knew that some bridges were too charred to be crossed again. A year later, Clara reached out, claiming to be pregnant and in need of financial support. The call was a jarring reminder of the pain we had endured, but it also underscored the distance we had come. "You know that's not possible," I said firmly before ending the call and blocking her number. It was a definitive closure on a chapter of our lives we were eager to leave behind. Tom and I sold our old house, the scene of so much strife, and moved into a new home that was everything we had dreamed of. It was our sanctuary, a place where the shadows of the past could not reach us. The sale, coupled with our financial compensation, left us with more than enough to fulfill our dreams of travel and a carefree life. As we settled into our new home, we often reflected on the journey that brought us here. The trials we faced tested our resolve, our morality, and our behavior towards those we had once considered family. But in the end, we emerged stronger, with a renewed appreciation for the peace and security we had fought so hard to protect. "Here's to new beginnings," Tom said one evening, raising a glass in our new living room, the sunset painting the sky outside with hues of gold and orange. "New beginnings," I echoed, the words a promise of hope, of adventures yet to come, and of the unbreakable bond that had carried us through the storm. Our story was not one of revenge or bitterness, but of resilience, of the moral courage to stand up for ourselves, and of the profound belief that moving on was not only possible but necessary for our happiness and well-being.